loved enemas. Yeah, bet you didn't expect that for number 10. The consumption of entheogens in the Americas dates back to the Olmec civilization, the earliest known Mesoamerican civilization. Evidently, this tradition was passed down and spread amongst many clans, with the consumption techniques evolving through generations. In the case of the Maya, well, they evidently understood the absorption processes of the lower digestive tract, because that's where they like their entheogens and P-actives and alcohol. And hilariously, this discovery is made through pottery. The first of these polychrome pottery jars was discovered in 1977, and several have been found since. Naturally, this became the subject of a landmark study in 1986, which analyzed the iconographic traditions of the Maya pottery pieces depicting the administration of enemas, and compiled a list of possible substances the Maya may have ingested. Then, to really drive it home, Peter, one of the paper's writers, decided to self-administer some Maya enema mix to test it out, and to quote him and his buddy who helped, the results certainly support the theoretical suggestion that alcohol is absorbed well from an enema. I can't believe two scientists owned up to getting ass drunk in a professional dialogue like they're small town teens. But now that the prestigious IG Nobel Prize has been awarded in 2022 to the scholars that pioneered this Maya enema research oh so long ago, we can expect more research on this topic in the coming years, and likely more than a few researchers giving themselves multiple laced enemas for study purposes. And when the enema is done, well, put a cork in it, dude, we got some work to do. Number 9 is obsidian dealers. The Mayas were cutting it up when it came to the obsidian game. Obsidian, which is also known as volcanic glass, was highly valued for its sharpness and durability back in the good old days. It also held deep cultural and historical significance in the Maya world. Naturally, Guatemala, which is renowned for its obsidian deposits, was a major mining and trading site for the Maya. Skilled craftsmen shaped obsidian into intricate tools, weapons, and household items and ceremonial artifacts. Through analysis of obsidian sources, researchers have traced in ancient networks and trade exchange routes that connected distant Maya territories. The Maya reverence for obsidian traveled as far as the product itself ended up doing, and it lingered even after the savage colonizers had laid siege to their advanced civilization, becoming a prize belonging in Europe shortly after the colonization of Central and South America in the mid-16th century. John Dee, the prominent Elizabethan-era psychonaut, was an English astronomer and occultist who famously possessed a black obsidian scrying mirror, which he believed allowed him to communicate with celestial beings. The specific detail of how and where he obtained the mirror are not extensively documented, but it can be assumed to be Mexico or Guatemala. And while talking about obsidian, let's coagulate that with tools of the trade. Number 8. Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History has completed yet another season of excavation at the Maya city of Culuba in the first week of July 2023. This site has been a known archaeological treasure chest since its discovery, providing researchers with evidence pertaining to human sacrifice especially, which was a central component of ancient Maya culture. And wouldn't you know it, this season they discovered a sacrificial altar. The cubic stone bore all the hallmarks. They don't specify what hallmarks of an ancient sacrificial slab are, but I'd sure like to know. And it was further confirmed by the discovery of 16 sacrificial stone knives in the surrounding area, 13 of which are made with that Guatemalan obsidian. The sacrifice of animals and people, which would be prisoners or volunteers, was conducted by high priests using altars like the ones discovered. Alfredo Barrera Rubio, a researcher at INAH, did elaborate that while the 16 sacrificial knives were unearthed at this altar, none had ever been used. These knives themselves were offerings specifically for the gods.
Number 7. Ancient insurance. Yes, I hear you. I know you wanted some laws about ancient insurance because insurance law is super interesting, and of course I found something related. Not exactly insurance as you know it today. No waiting on hold for a claim they probably won't give you. No, this was more about justice. This law states if the robber is not captured, the man who has been robbed shall, in the presence of God, what else, make an itemized statement of his loss, and the city and the governor in whose jurisdiction the robbery was committed shall compensate him for whatever was lost. Kind of like a forced insurance policy. Judging from the last couple of points, I don't want to see what happens if they find out you falsified that information before God. I don't think that would be a good idea for you. Don't do it. Number 6. Farmers. Irrigation. It's the invention that made agriculture boom. Now in Mesopotamia, people could grow food, lots of food, and civilization kinda just built itself around it. However, this irrigation was all fueled by Mother Nature, so floods and droughts kinda put a damper on that. It's kinda like when I fart. I never know when it's gonna happen, it just does. Kind of like the Force. Maybe sometimes I force it out. Anyway, this law states that if a man neglects to maintain his dike and does not strengthen it, and a break is made in his dike, then the water is carried away from the farmland. The man in whose dike the break has been made shall replace the grain which has been damaged. If he is not able to replace the grain, they shall sell him and his goods, and the farmers whose grain the water has carried away shall divide the proceeds from the sale. Now listen, I like that because I grew up in rural Canada, so you know, farmers helping each other. I like that, neighborly, except the part where the guy that makes a mistake, we sell him and take his stuff. That part I don't like. Helping each other is great. Dividing the proceeds is awesome, but maybe we should be nice to Bill. Sometimes Bill makes mistakes. That's all I'm saying. Number 5, whales. Back in the day, a whale, dolphin, or any animal like that could fetch you a high price. So every once in a while, a creature like that washes up on the beach. You can understand why everyone would want such a stinky, rotting corpse. Whale oil was a hot commodity of the past. Edward II, being the snobby royal that he was, said, "Nah, why you made it, bruv? The whales, that's more oil. You not getting that, that's more." So in 1324, he made a law that said any whale that washes up on shore belongs to him. Now, I'm not exactly sure how that works because there's no phones and it would take a minute to get the message to them, but if the whales wash up on the beach, it ain't going anywhere, so have fun fighting over it. Good luck guys. Number 4, stolen milk. Texas, the land of cowboys, barbecue, and Jesus. America at its finest. Shout out to Texas. How you folks doing? I'd love to come out and see you sometime. Maybe when I'm famous. Anyway, there's a law from Texas from way back in the day that I think was very strange. Up until 1974, it was illegal to milk your neighbor's cow. Now, for those that don't live in the country, I'd be the first to tell you how important agricultural communities are, and dairy farmers are some of the finest. Although I find it strange because after a long day of milking your cows, no farmer ever said, "Well, better go over to Dale's house and milk his cows. He ain't gonna do it." No one ever said that. Farming's hard. The law was most likely there to protect those that would steal the white gold, not so much as awkwardly come over and milk old Betsy for you. It's kind of a weird thought. Number 3, marriage in the afterlife. Oh boy, this one is so weird. Since the 19th century in France, marrying a corpse has been legal. Now, I know what we're all thinking, and that ain't the reason why it happened. Don't get your mind out of the gutter. Stop it. It was more about legal birthright, like if your husband perished in battle before little Louis was born. However, I just can't stomach the issue of your partner being a corpse. Baby, I love you, and I don't care if your eye is hanging out by a skull with a tendon. It doesn't matter to me that a stray dog took your leg away. Your intestines hanging out of your stomach is beautiful to me. That's just a new fashion trend. Oh, and the smell? Oh, I love the graveyard smell, honey. You're beautiful. Just weird. Imagine like showing up to a party like, "Hi, this is my wife, this is Christine." Number 2, no Christmas. I don't know about you guys, but I love Christmas. Don't get me wrong, I'm looking forward to seeing all my friends at the cottage this summer. I got the Hawaiian shirt on, we're cruising, baby, I love it. But Christmas, man, that's my favorite. It's the shopping stress. I love to see the joy in people's faces when you get them gifts. I love gifts. Dinner, the desserts, I love it all. And of course, I was always a good boy on Christmas, I promise. Never bad once. Well, back in the 1600s, King Charles I was unhappy with another group that did not share his religious values. It's kind of a trend in history. So for this, he canceled Christmas. He outlawed Christmas. How awful! Imagine, no more awkward dinners with your uncle saying something insensitive at the dinner table. No more stuffing your face with good food, and no more Santa Claus. I didn't think he was a thing back then in the 1600s, but we'll go with it. So back in 1660, this law was revoked under new management, and thank goodness, because I love Christmas. Thank you for that. Thank you. Number 1, trial by combat. My brother in Christ, this one is really strange. Sometimes marriages don't work out, things happen, life is not easy, and managing your way through a relationship can be tough. So anyone that's going through a divorce right now, the best advice I could give you is that, look, you once loved each other at some point, so do your best, have some grace, and split peacefully. It's just better for everyone that way, including yourselves. That being said, a medieval German tradition was to decide on divorces by combat. What else, of course? The husband would sit in a hole with his arm tied and have a bag of rocks, and the wife would have a club. Basically, it was time to go Katniss Everdeen on each other. And I can't really describe what happens next because you two probably wouldn't like it, but that's how it goes. Number 10, the time warp. Okay, here's a very trippy fact for you. We all know ancient Rome, right? The lovable empire that took over a large portion of the world at its peak. Trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. Caesar, Augustus, the Colosseum. Yeah, those guys. We all know how long ago that was, right? 2,000 years or more. They were pretty cool dudes. Today they are remembered for being a very successful empire and their triumphs. Well, what if I told you that the Romans are to us what the ancient Egyptians were to the Romans? Does that make sense? That makes sense. And they were still alive to tell the story. Well, at least some of them and some of it. Yes, that's right. When Rome was taking over, it was understood that Egypt was a land of great antiquity, and there was much to learn. However, most of what we know of Egypt comes from Egyptian tombs, pyramids, and Egyptology from the early 20th century. Still pretty cool though. Number 9, board games. Call me crazy, but I love board games. My two favorite are arguably the most depressing. One being an actual fictionalized version of life, and seeing who can rack up the biggest mortgages after having 6 kids as a police officer with a chef's salary. Ooh, fun. And the other is a recreation of the real estate moguls that charged exuberant amounts of rent during the Great Depression in the 30s. Wow, fun. Thanks, Parker Brothers. This may be because I have ancestors in ancient Egypt. I probably don't, but we're just gonna roll with that joke anyway. I make bad jokes like that because ancient Egyptians loved board games. That was my connection. Yeah, I know, right? Games like 20 Squares, Hounds and Jackals, which is pretty much just snakes and ladders, and the most popular, Semet, which tasks players with moving their pieces on squares and eventually off the board. Kind of like Sorry, which is also one of my favorite games. I love Sorry. I think that we had a Canadian version called Getting Into Trouble. You know, the thing in the middle and you bop it. Remember that thing? The dice? Remember that? You say, what are you guys doing? Getting into trouble, Mom! So lame. So lame, dude. Number 8, labor strike. To say that it took a lot of manpower to build the pyramids, or really anything the ancient Egyptians ever built, is a little bit of an understatement. A lot of work went into it. Not only are the builds massive in scale, but also extremely complex and detailed, fooling some engineers today. They don't know how exactly they did it. Can you imagine building or moving all of those massive stones in the African heat and sun? I would need so much water. Just like today, it's really hot today. Well, as it turns out, this wasn't always the greatest job on planet Earth. Oh, surprise! And in one incident in the 12th century BC, the workers under Ramses III organized what may have been the very first labor strike. The workers had not received their grain rations and thus hid away in the monasteries until their woes were heard. It worked, and they were given their rations. Oh, so cool. First labor strike, that's so weird. They have modern stuff too. Wow.
Number 7. The Indus River Valley Civilization. What's now modern Pakistan was one of the world's earliest societies ever. It was also referred to as the Harappan Civilization, or the Indus. And they were actually quite large. We often hear about Vikings and how, there were thousands of them, or the 300 Spartan warriors. Well, the Indus were in the millions. Aside from the other earliest civilizations, Egyptians and Mesopotamians, they were considered the most extensive. The world's first ever dentists came from the Indus Valley. Something way more interesting than dentist facts is that when compared to Egyptian ancient cultures, the Indus never built any palaces or temples, right? Meaning there were probably no priests or kings. But we still get to study ancient texts. Those are always fun and often confusing. The Indus Valley Civilization had a language that we're slowly but surely deciphering. But even so, there's around 250 to 500 characters that still remain a mystery. So, we can figure out what these guys ate thousands of years ago, but we have no idea what they were saying. Signs be hard. Number 6, Gobekli Tepe. Just 6 miles from the ancient Turkish city Urfa, Gobekli Tepe is 100,000 years old. And they are these massive stone circles created by a civilization that predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. We're convinced it's the world's oldest temple, a holy temple rather. This area in the world, now it may not be a spectacle, but thousands of years ago, you would be able to see the horizon in every direction from this point. You would also see herds of beautiful animals racing by. There'd be fields of barley, wild wheat. It would have looked like a temple from The Legend of Zelda. It was gorgeous and the landscape was fresh. Mind you, because it was so long ago. It was discovered back in 1960s. University anthropologists, they were doing a survey of the region, they found this place and assumed that it was an ancient cemetery and nothing more, and then continued on their merry way. Then cut to 1994, Klaus Schmidt was doing surveys for himself, found the same site, and knew right away from the first glance that this was man-made. Oh, imagine that. Imagine missing Gobekli Tepe the first time and being like, the cemetery. Number 5, Anasazi. Before the first skyscrapers were built in the 1880s, the Anasazi built massive stone buildings on the side of cliffs back in the 12th century. Some of these walls housed up to hundreds of residents, right? Like a skyscraper, a building, like a condo, just in the wall. What's now present-day Mesoamerica National Park was pretty intense back in the earlier days. Scientists have uncovered some hints as to where these creative cliff builders disappeared to. Well, violence. That seems to be the common denominator here. Yeah, the thing that's still going strong today, well, thousands of years ago, back in the 12th century United States, long-term drought led to the Anasazi to violence, and perhaps they wiped out each other. Other theories suggest that the Anasazi had to abandon their massive homes around the 1300s and then travel south. Either way, these are so impressive to look at. Number 4. Ancient Vikings. I'm a big Assassin's Creed fan. When they announced Vikings as their newest installment, I was pretty excited. Then I started playing it and I was like, yeah, that's not great. I'm a big Norse mythology fan, okay? But what actually happened to Greenland's Vikings? That's the mystery. Well, around 985 AD, Eric the Red arrived with a large fleet to colonize the island, and of course was subsequently banished for manslaughter. So now we have 2 colonies on Greenland, a large eastern colony and a smaller western one. Now these Vikings didn't build massive pyramids, but instead they built stone churches that are still standing to this day. These Vikings were around for a few hundred years, and at one point in time there were 5,000 Vikings, give or take. Now that's incredible, but later on in 1721 a missionary expedition arrived and there were not 5,000 Vikings. In fact, there were no Vikings. Where did they go? Archaeologists did the digging and apparently the western settlement died off around 1400 AD. And just decades later, the eastern settlement was abandoned. Well, there's a handful of family fun movies that hint to what happened. The Ice Age. Yeah, well, the small one in the 14th century at least is the biggest factor on where these Vikings disappeared to. Yeah, just a small Ice Age classic. That's haunting for a Canadian to hear. Number 3. Easter Island. Back between 300 and 1200 AD, Polynesians used canoes, not Carnival cruise ships, canoes to somehow travel all the way to Easter Island, over 2,000 miles away from Chile. Yeah, that feat in itself is impressive, but when you start really thinking about the Easter Island heads on the actual island, it gets even more impressive. The Easter Island Moai statues, keep in mind there were hundreds, reach up to 32 feet high, and they weigh over 82 tons. It was a sight to see. That was until the 1800s. That's when the civilization suddenly vanished out of nowhere. Many of these statues were also destroyed during this time. The population as well was decreased drastically, and the island's higher-ups, be it priests or chiefs, whoever, were all overthrown. Well, whatever happened may give us some ideas for the future. Easter Islanders cut down so many trees that before their seeds could even enter the earth again, rats ate them. So these guys simply ran out of trees, which means they ran out of rope or the ability to make more canoes. So they were trapped. So naturally, a civil war began alongside starvation. Plus the arrival of Europeans in 1722, they immediately wiped out most of the remaining Easter Islanders. And then around the late 1800s, waves of smallpox reduced the amount of island natives to just 100. It was brutal. Number 2, the Mississippians. We'll dial back the calendar now to 700 CE. Now at this point, before European colonization, the American Southeast was home to the Mississippians. Their main area was the city called Cahokia, which is now modern-day Collinsville, Illinois. And that's not large either, it's just 6 square miles. Now check out this photo of Monk's Mound, a now historic site. We look at ancient Egyptians and our jaws drop at the sight of those pyramids, plus their alignment with the stars. That's obviously, of course, fascinating. Well, Cahokia was once home to pyramids and large wooden structures as well. We're not exactly sure what happened to this 40,000 person civilization, but experts guess famine and disease were one of the many factors. And finally, number 1. Clovis. Taking a look at some mammoth hunters for our last point here. Now this civilization is considered the first inhabitants of the New World. Pretty intense stuff. Hunters would use what's called Clovis points to get their next meal. They would use chipped flint, and they had to hunt bison, mammoths, deer, anything that had skin to be used for shelter and or clothing. In fact, this 10,000-year-old civilization may have disappeared at the same time as mammoths. After all, with these historical beasts acting as both your gear and your food, yeah, eating them ought to do some damage down the road. Not even an ice age was included yet, and already they're running out of resources.
Number 10. Corral. The The sacred city of Corral is an archaeological site considered to be one of the oldest known civilizations in the Americas. The formation of the civilization took place around 3500 BCE and ran to about 1800 BCE. No other site has been found with such a diversity of buildings and architecture and has since been declared a Humanity Cultural Heritage Site by UNESCO themselves. Uncovered around 1905, Peruvian archaeologists provided the first documentation on the civilization at Corral. They appear to have an economy of some sort, selling mostly textiles and fish. The civilization is considered a pre-ceramic culture, since archaeologists have yet to find any sculpted or painted art. However, they did find a system of writing called quipu, which is a string-based recording device suggesting a proto-writing of some sort. They were widely known for their architecture of huge earth-landscaped projects of mounds, particularly a massive labyrinth of underground circular connecting plazas. They were ahead of their time, yeah. Number 9. The Etruscans. Side note, if you dig what we do here on BumbleBee, make sure to Hulk smash that like button for us, huh? The Etruscan civilization was a people of Etruria in ancient Italy. They had a common language, culture, and formed a federation of cities. Their territory covered now what is Tuscany, Umbria, and Lazio. The earliest evidence of this culture is from about 900 BC. This is the period of the Iron Age considered to be the earliest phase of Etruscan civilization. With a maximum population peaking around 750 BC, the earliest examples of writing are inscriptions found around 700 BC. They developed a system of writing derived from the Euboean alphabet. The language remains only partly understood, making modern understanding of their society and culture heavily dependent on later Roman and Greek sources. Number 8. Inca. The Incan Empire was the largest of pre-Columbian America. The center of the empire was the city of Cusco. The Incans arose from the Peruvian highlands in the late 12th century. The Spanish began their conquest of the empire in 1532, and by 1572, the last Inca state was fully conquered. Before they fell, the Incas were able to construct one of the greatest imperial states in history, accidentally. Without the use of a wheel, knowledge of iron or steel, or even a system of reading and writing. Yeah, these guys were good. About all 14 million of them as well. The empire included construction of monumental architecture, stone and road work reaching to all corners of the empire, and even finely woven textiles. They functioned without money and without markets. Instead, exchange of goods and services was based on individuals, groups, and rulers. Taxes consisted of a labor obligation, usually construction. Everyone was either lifting or carving, you know? The Inca rulers would even grant access to land goods and celebratory feasts for the workers if you did a good job. Dude, this place sounds awesome. Sign me up.
Number 7, Nan Madal. This is one I had never heard of before. Very interesting too, especially one that has been described as the Venice of the Pacific. Sometimes I'm described as that. Not really. Some even think it has connections to Atlantis. Ooh, maybe. That I'm not sure of. However, if you took a pleasure cruise with your spouse down to the Pacific, and why not? Most people can't say that they've done that, so go do it. You would find an ancient stone ruins built upon some land, and more interestingly, built upon a coral reef. A series of small artificial islands connected by canals. Ones belonging to the Soudler dynasty, I'm pretty sure I said that right, which yes, that's new to me too. Today, Nan Madal is a protected heritage site. So you know what, bumblebees? Don't go there and take anything that you weren't supposed to. Go look, but don't touch. I'm watching. I'm watching. Always watching.
Number 6. The city of Corral Supe. The ancient city of Corral Supe is the oldest civilization center in the whole of the Americas, being over 5,000 years old. You'll find this lovely World Heritage Site in the desert of Peru's Supa Valley, north of the Lima River. Being first built in 26,000 BC, before the Great Pyramids were even built, the site itself has temples, an amphitheater, plazas, and ordinary houses. The society that actually built and lived here were apparently a gentle society, built on commerce and pleasure, which is backed up by the fact that we haven't really found any defenses, mangled bodies, or tools of war. We did find tools of music though, specifically 32 flutes and 37 cornets. So the Andean people who inhabited this place didn't fight, and they knew how to have a hoedown. Let's bring back this way of life, yeah, maybe?
Number 5. Hattusa. Rejoice, my late 90s PC gamers, for I bring another point in your honor, the city of Hattusa of the Hittite Empire. Before this list, my only knowledge of the Hittites came from Age of Empires. I swear, man, every time I start up a random scenario and just looking for a little 1998 nostalgia, the Hittites come up and attack me before I can get my walls up. It's the worst. Well, this makes a lot of sense actually, because the Hittite Empire was one of the first civilizations to reach the Iron Age. In real life. Hattusa was the capital of said empire. Today, the very beautiful ancient ruins can be found near Turkey. So the question is, how did such a strong empire fall? The answer was the Assyrians. Over time, the Assyrians conquered more and more, until Hattusa kinda just was depopulated. There's been some interesting finds at the sites as well, such as 2 sphinxes that the international community got into an argument over whose museum they should sit in. What's the lesson in this one? Well, nothing lasts forever, and maybe wait till I build my walls to attack me. Just wait, dude. Just wait.
Number 4, Volubilis. Whoa, what's this? Another World Heritage Site? During the 1st century of both BC and AD, the city of Volubilis in modern-day Morocco was a cultural mixing pot. First settled by the Berbers and eventually became the chief inland city of the Roman Empire province that was located here, which I will totally mess up the pronunciation of, so I'm not going to say it at all. People of both the Islamic and Christian religions would come here trading, living, and creating beautiful mosaics for over 10 centuries, and it became the capital of Idris I, founder of the Idris dynasty. The parts of the city that we have discovered so far include an aqueduct, thermal baths, and a triumphal arch. And they're all in pretty primo condition given all the crazy weather, earthquakes, and multiple different inhabitants over the year. It honestly seems like a place a lot of people should have heard of. Maybe I'm just the only one who hasn't, I don't know.
Number 3, Antioch. Boy, lots of learning today, and judging from the comments, you guys like learning from us, so thanks guys, that means a lot, thank you so much. Besides a Monty Python skit about a hand grenade, I hadn't heard about Antioch. Who would have thought? I know. Sometimes referred to as the cradle of Christianity, it played a major role in Christianity and its longevity. Founded by one of Alexander the Great's generals, the city was in a prime location and benefited from all sorts of trade routes, like the Silk Road for example. Surprisingly, the city grew so much it even began to rival Alexandria, with an estimated population of 250,000 at its peak. Whew, that's a lot of people. It was a happening place. Sadly, it pulled a Detroit and went from a very profitable city to, well, not so popular one, as natural disasters like earthquakes and a declining trade made the city a not so happening place. All I know is that you pull the pin and count to 3, not 2, 3, and certainly not 5. I do know that.
Number 2, Derinkuyu Underground City. Hey, honey, I found a hidden room behind the basement wall, and you're not gonna believe this, but it leads to an 18-story deep 7th or 8th century underground city used by around 20,000 people as a defense against invaders, with ventilation shafts, waterways, stables, churches, and storage. So I think the value of our house just went up. Yes, back in 1963, a local man in Cappadocia, Turkey, who was renovating his house, stumbled upon an entrance to this massive underground labyrinth of chambers, shafts, and corridors that goes over 85 meters deep into the ground. It had huge stone doors and everything from schools to wine rooms for people to use as a defense against invasion and religious persecution. We don't actually know which civilization built this city, but it once connected to many other underground cities that have been discovered in the area, with miles-long tunnels. It's honestly the coolest thing I've ever heard of, and I may need to plan a trip. Speaking of, have any of these sites maybe made the travel list for any of you guys? Let me know down below.
Number 1, Levanta. Mesoamerica, cool place, lots of treasure, and home of Levanta. These ruins are located in the spicy Mexican state of Tabasco. Constructed by the Olmecs, one of the oldest civilizations in the Americas, Levanta was a civic and ceremonial center. As a ceremonial center, there are tombs, mounds, and ceremonial offerings. Strangely enough, there's a pyramid as well, and some statues that have big head mode cheat enabled. They're big heads. It seems Levanta is a strange mishmash of little sites and artifacts, also including mosaics, altars, and some strange rock formations. All these lovely artifacts were not discovered fully until the 1950s, so makes you wonder what else we've lost of time in that thick jungle.
Number 10, Treaties of the Vessels. I think that most of us love the idea of uncovering some kind of lost treasure. I for one would love to pull an Indiana Jones and uncover artifacts lost to the sands of time, but realistically you need a lot of clues in order to find these things. They could be anywhere. The world is quite a large place, you know. That's why ancient texts and documents are so important to researchers, because sometimes they can give clues as to where some treasures might be. This is sort of the case with the treaties of the vessels. This ancient Hebrew text claims to reveal the location of where the treasures of King Solomon's temple are hidden. Well, sort of. The text discusses the location of the treasures as well as the fate of the Ark of the Covenant, which is a chest that is said to hold tablets engraved with the 10 Commandments. And as you would imagine, these are highly sought after, but no one knows where it is, and the treaties of the vessels isn't really much help to researchers. The text says that the location of these things will, quote, not be revealed until the day of the coming of the Messiah, son of David. So it just teases us with this mystery. We still have to wait to find these treasures. At number 9, Gospel of the Lots of Mary. Have you ever wished that you could know the future? Maybe you want to know how a relationship would play out, or if you should do something about your career, but you just need that little confirmation of future events to help you along. Well, if you lived in ancient times, then you might have sought out the Gospel of the Lots of Mary to help you with your needs. This ancient text is quite the gospel and dates back to around 1500 years. The Gospel of the Lots of Mary doesn't discuss the life of Jesus Christ, but instead contains 37 oracles that were written pretty vaguely. The original text was written in Coptic, an Egyptian language, and has been translated in modern times. The book opens with the words, quote, the Gospel of the Lots of Mary, the mother of the Lord Jesus Christ, she to whom Gabriel the archangel brought the good news. He who will go forward with his whole heart will obtain what he seeks, only do not be of two minds. End quote. Researchers believe that this book would have been used for divination in an attempt to seek knowledge of the future. Someone in need of answers would seek out this book, ask a question, and then would have gone through a process that would randomly select one of the 37 oracles to give answers to said person's problem. Almost like how we read horoscopes, but much more mysterious. Before we carry on talking about these strange and mysterious texts, why not leave a big ol' thumbs up on this video if you are thoroughly entertained so far, and while you're at it, why not subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this one and join the hive. At number 8, Libra lentius. This next ancient text almost counts as a hidden message because of where this text was found by researchers. The Libra lentius is an ancient text written in Etruscan, a language that was used in Italy in ancient times. What makes this text so mysterious is the fact that it was found preserved in the wrappings of an Egyptian mummy that dates back around 2200 years. This ancient text's meaning isn't exactly clear, partially because the Etruscan language isn't fully understood, but researchers believe that the written text on the mummy's wrappings are of a ritual calendar. More research is needed to fully decipher this mysterious text, but it's a really cool find nonetheless.
Number 7, police. Bad boys, what are you gonna do? Yes, that's right, ancient Egypt may have had the first police force in history. Who would have thought? I actually didn't know that. I mean, sure, the vizier is great and all, but he can't possibly go around arresting everyone. He'd be at it all day, he can't do that. So it's only natural that you hire a bunch of dudes to do it for you. Can't get them all, but you can get some of them. While they did provide some limited support to communities and crime in towns, most of their arrests were made against those who were a little too greedy and thought grave robbing, well, the many sacred tombs around would make for an easy payday. It didn't. Number 6, Bloodhounds and Baboons. That's a weird title. This one is so weird, but okay, here we go. We've all seen the movies where there's a crook, a perp, or someone who's trying to outrun the law. Andy Dufresne was right. You gotta crawl through a lot if you want your freedom. I remember Andy Dufresne. Anyway, well, in these scenes there was a good chance that law enforcement has dogs with them. Oh yeah, see, I'm getting somewhere with this. There's also a good chance that those dogs were bloodhounds. Cute dogs actually, but the reason they bring them along is because they have a great nose. They can sniff a scent and follow it for miles, oftentimes leading to the crook. Smart dogs. What if I told you though that this sort of thing existed in ancient Egypt, except that it wasn't dogs, it was baboons? Yeah, who would have thought? Yes, that's right, there's depictions of police with baboons assisting in the work with crooks and or criminals. It's all jokes until Diddy Kong shows up to arrest you. Now it's DK time, baby. Uh-oh. Number 5, get to work. Also, speaking of movies, you know that classic scene where the prisoners are out on work duty? Everyone's in their like orange jumpsuits, they're cleaning up all the garbage. Okay, that, but ancient. A lot of criminals, thieves, and no good rotten folks were used for hard manual labor. Pretty classic. And you guessed it, building the pyramids. While the pyramids are often misconceived of being built by YouTube's least favorite S word, it was most likely built by a combination of people, mostly crafted skillsmen and builders, followed by crooks and those wishing to get out of the hot sun. The job was dangerous, hot, like I said, and oftentimes heavy lifting, too much for me. While normal workers were granted 2 days off a year because it is backbreaking work, the criminals were tasked with quarrying stone with no days off. No machines, no iron tools, I mean it's all, oh man, that must be awful. Just the horror. Just the worst. Number 4, tarnished reputation. This one actually makes a lot of sense, really. Depending on how heinous the crime is, you wouldn't want this for stealing some bubblegum. So if you found yourself in hot trouble or the principal's office, which I was never in for being a bad boy, I was good every single time, I promise. No one believes me still, but I was. The vizier or government would keep track of who's been sneaking in the tombs like Lara Croft. Hence, they could use this information to tarnish your reputation. It was also used against false witnesses and those wishing to gain something from a legal situation. Those that wish to bear false witness would immediately have something amputated because that's the law around here, partner. Number 3, Fair Pharaoh. The great Pharaoh Bucharest is an interesting subject to say the least. First off, I had to say his name a couple times before I really understood what was going on there. I blame the dyslexia, but that's just how it goes, baby. But secondly, he's the guy that takes power and goes, whoa, 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 guys, maybe not so harsh. And I use this term lightly, but he improved human rights. Specifically improvements for prisoners who owe debt. Sounds like someone might have owed someone a few bucks himself. Interestingly enough, his laws were influenced by Greek laws, who then influenced more Greek laws, who those Greek laws influenced Roman laws, who then influenced our modern law. There's a big chain of events there. Trust me, it all matches up. Number 2, your nose knows. Knows to stay out of trouble. I saved this one for the bottom of the list because, well, it's just so awful and weird. In a town called Rhino Cholera, not too far from Cairo, but 200 miles, was a town full of people with no noses. What? I know. This wasn't a Red Skull Comic Con convention, but a penal colony of sorts, maybe the first. These people were or had been accused of thievery, and for this they had their noses removed to show anyone who visited what kind of people they really were. In a world of infection and disease, I cannot recommend this. It's not a good idea. You probably wouldn't make it after they removed it. The name Rhino Cholera, which literally translates to Clip Nose, the town of Clip Nose. That's not good. Number 1, in God's hands. Remember before I mentioned the priests used to handle verdicts? Well, it's crazier than you might think, actually. While the Pharaoh was top dog in ancient Egypt, and I mean he was top dog, you don't get past the Pharaoh. The gods controlled everything and the Egyptians worshipped their gods. Crops, weather, justice, I mean they did everything. So oftentimes the priest's verdicts would come down from the gods themselves. If that wasn't enough, the god Mayans was responsible for those criminals in the afterlife, where they would also receive comeuppance. Uh-oh, you're not safe anywhere. A sort of jail in the sky, if you will. Alcatraz has nothing on that. You're bad here, you're bad in the sky, you're bad everywhere, bad in the afterlife. So that's why, folks, you behave yourselves. Keep your nose, behave yourself.
It's an orderless list as we start off with the Khmer Empire. Like a video game, I'm gonna give y'all their stats. So, where? It's across today's Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand. When? 800 to 1400. Strengths, advanced water system, strong economy, natural resources. Weaknesses, uncontrollable population. Rival civilizations, overexpansion. Fun fact, the Khmer Empire only lost one major naval battle in 600 years. Hella relevant, seeing as the Khmer Empire really embraced that whole water is life thing. The civilization had an extensive water network so that their capital city, Angkor, would flourish no matter the season. Angkor was also at one point one of our world's largest cities, covering 386 square miles and accommodating around 1 million people. Very hydrated people, that is. The advanced water system contained a network of channels and reservoirs that utilized monsoon climates to collect water for use in dry season. Each area of the city had 2 channels of water running through it for fresh and for soiled, earning it the title of the hydraulic city by our contemporary historians. The gradual decline of the Khmer Empire can be attributed to 3 main factors: the diluting of their culture through too many new strands of Buddhism, a gradual weakening of their water network, and an overexpansion that brought them into conflict with the neighboring Ayutthaya kingdom. Alright, 1 is done, now 2 for you. Let's check out the Hittites. So, stats: where? Across Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. When? 1700 to 700 BC. Strengths: expert chariot makers, iron manufacturers, and they had the fortified city of Hatsua. Weaknesses: drawn out rivalry with the Egyptians, city-states had no political unity, and a slow economical advancement. Fun fact, Hittite battle axes were literally shaped like human hands. Yeah, I know, right? Kinda cool. Alrighty, so these guys at their peak actually rivaled Egypt's kingdom and made them look like a bunch of backwood hicks. In fact, they were the ones who were effing up Egypt so bad, Ramses II had to sign a peace treaty with them, only after they had the world's largest chariot battle, because boys will be boys or whatever. So, how'd these guys manage to slip from historical radar? Well, it wasn't just being assumed into the Assyrian Empire, it was because, like the Khmer, their culture varied considerably between regions and became too diluted to be consistent. Also, like many other forgotten civilizations, Hittite lands were divided up into city-states with no political unity. The Hittite Empire collapsed in 1160 BC after civil war and a scramble for the throne. Scattered and leaderless, a settlement was formed between the Syro-Hittite people, and this was only for a brief respite before they're invaded by the Assyrians in 700 BC. Love saying this next one's name, it's Pumapunko. Stats: where? Tiwanaku, La Paz, Bolivia. When? Somewhere around 500 CE until question mark. Strengths: precision carving and advanced architecture. Weaknesses: being accused of having aliens help. Fun fact, in Amara, Pumapunko means the door of the puma. Pumapunko was a city already abandoned when the Incas conquered the area in 1470. Predating that, we have no idea who built it and what happened to them. Alright, segment done, moving on. No, not really, but could you imagine? Yeah, no, so it was already empty when the Incas came there, and they spared no expense incorporating Pumapunko and the rest of Tiwanaku City into their empire, believing it to be the place of their deity of creation, and where that deity created the ancestral people of all ethnicities and sent them out in the world to populate the respective lands. So, Incas believed the fallen stone portraits near Pumapunko to be the models of those first humans from the creation myth. These stone figures, however, are just depictions from the city's former rulers. The exact origin and age of the site is endlessly disputed. As archaeologists know, Pumapunko was a thriving ancient town originating from somewhere around 500 to 600 CE, and it's got mankind's most incredible stonework. Each is cut in such a precise way that they fit together perfectly and lock into each other. Not even a razor blade can slide between them. Naturally, their perfection is all the evidence ancient alien believers need to grab the tinfoil hat.
Number 7. Mayans. One of the most advanced civilizations on this list, the Maya were somehow able to create these massive stone structures in the middle of southern Mexico jungles. Next to the Egyptian pyramids, I'd say these are almost just as popular at this point. One of the most interesting pieces of the Maya, I'm sure as we all recall, was their calendar and the way that they worked it. I mean, we made a movie about 2012. The news was talking about 2012. Literally 12 years after Y2K, we're like, what if it happens again? Like, you know, this time seems serious. It's not gonna happen. We're good for now. We're gonna probably end ourselves before a calendar or, you know, a movie does. The Yucatan jungles are filled with pyramids and beautiful complex monuments lost in time, but where did the builders go and why did they leave? Well, a couple scientists analyzed rock samples around these areas and they were able to study the water levels in nearby lakes, suggesting that the reason the Mayans disappeared were not aliens, but rather they collapsed because of a drought. That checks out. Aliens are cool, you know, and the calendar stuff's cool, but nah, they're just drought. Number 6. Gobekli Tepe. Just 6 miles from the ancient Turkish city Urfa, Gobekli Tepe is 100,000 years old. They are these massive stone circles created by a civilization that predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. Yeah, it's nuts. We're convinced it's the world's oldest temple, a holy temple rather. Because this area in the world, I mean now it may not be a spectacle, but thousands of years ago, you would be able to see the horizon in every single direction. Herds of beautiful animals racing by, fields of barley and wheat. It would have looked like a temple from Legend of Zelda. Masterpiece. It was actually first discovered back in the 1960s by university anthropologists. They were doing a survey of the region, found this place, and assumed it was an ancient cemetery and then nothing more, and then continued on their merry way. Now cut to 1994, best year ever. Klaus Schmidt was doing surveys for himself, found the same site, and knew right away from the first glance that this was man-made and there was much, much more to it. Number 5, Clovis. We're taking a look at some mammoth hunters for this next point. This civilization is considered the first inhabitants of the New World. Hunters would use what's called Clovis points to get their next meal. They would use chipped flint. Now they had to hunt bison, mammoths, deer, anything that had skin to use for shelter, but also clothing. In fact, this 10,000-year-old civilization may have disappeared at the same time as mammoths. After all, with these historical beasts acting as both your gear and your food, the Ice Age ought to do some damage. Number 4. Anasazi. Before the first skyscrapers were built in the 1800s, the Anasazi built massive stone buildings as well on the sides of cliffs back in the 12th century. Some of these walls, by the way, housed up to hundreds of residents. They were huge. What's now present-day Massive Verity National Park was pretty intense back in those days. Scientists have uncovered some hints as to where these creative cliff builders disappeared to. Well, violence. Yeah, the thing that's still going strong today, thousands of years later, see, back in the 12th century United States, long-term drought led the Anasazi to violence, and perhaps they just wiped each other out. Other theories suggest that the Anasazi had to abandon their massive homes around the 1300s and then travel south. Either or. Number 3. Easter Islanders. Back between 300 and 1200 AD, Polynesians used canoes, not Carnival cruise ships, but canoes, like little canoes, and then somehow traveled all the way to Easter Island, over 2,000 miles away from Chile. That feat in itself is impressive. When you start to really think about the Easter Island heads on that island, it gets even more impressive. The Easter Island Moai statues, keep in mind there were hundreds of them at one point, reached up to 32 feet high and weighed over 82 tons. It was a sight to see until the 1800s, because that's when the civilization vanished. But what happened? Well, many of these statues were destroyed during this time as well, so history doesn't really tell us much. The population was decreased drastically, and the island higher-ups, be it priests or chiefs, were all overthrown. Well, what happened to them may give us some ideas for the future. See, Easter Islanders cut down so many trees that before those seeds could enter the earth again, rats ate them all. These guys ran out of trees, which means they ran out of rope or the ability to make more canoes. So naturally, a civil war began, everyone was freaking out, plus starvation. Also plus the arrival of Europeans in 1722, they immediately wiped out most of the remaining Easter Islanders. Then around the 1800s, waves of smallpox reduced the amount of island natives to just 100. Number 2. Vikings. I'm a big Assassin's Creed fan, and when they announced Vikings as their newest installment, I was so excited. I'm a big Norse mythology fan, but what actually happened to Greenland Vikings? There's a huge mystery around them. Well, around 985 AD, Eric the Red arrived with large fleet to colonize the island, and of course was subsequently banished for manslaughter. Yeah. So now we have 2 colonies on Greenland, a large eastern colony and a smaller western one. Now these Vikings didn't build massive pyramids, but instead they built stone churches that still stand to this day. These Vikings were around for a few hundred years, and at one point in time there were 5,000 Vikings or so. That's incredible, that's a lot of Vikings. But later on in 1721, a missionary expedition arrived, and there were not 5,000 Vikings, in fact there were 0 Vikings. Archaeologists did the digging, and apparently the western settlement died off around 1400 AD, and just decades later the eastern settlement was, well, simply abandoned. And there's also a handful of family fun movies that hint at what happened to them as well. The Ice Age, well, the small one in the 14th century, but still an Ice Age nonetheless. Number 1, the Indus River Valley Civilization. What's now modern Pakistan was one of the world's earliest societies. Also referred to as the Harappan civilization or the Indus, were actually quite large. We were talking about Vikings in the thousands, but the Indus reached about 5 million. Aside from the other earliest civilizations, be it Egyptians and the Mesopotamians, they were considered the most extensive. The world's first ever dentist came from the Indus Valley, so thank you. Something way more interesting though than dentist facts is that when compared to Egyptian ancient cultures, the Indus never built any palaces or temples, meaning there were no priests or kings. But we still get to study ancient texts, those are always fun and confusing. The Indus had a language that we're slowly but surely decoding today, but even so there's still around 250 to 500 characters that remain a mystery. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today to talk shop about 10 lost civilizations. Starting our list off at number 10, the first skull. Before we get into some mysterious happenings in history, we have to talk about the very first Neanderthal skull that was ever discovered. The discovery came about back in 1829. The skull was found in a cave near Angus, Belgium. Now at the time, they didn't even realize it was the skull of a Neanderthal. That knowledge came much later, around 1856. And at that time, quarry workers were ripping apart limestone in a Fedhofer cave near the Germany city Dusseldorf. But this skull was found in Neanderthal, a small valley of the Dussel River. Yeah. Hence, the name, now we understand that. The skull was human, but it wasn't. This was game changing. Number 9, medicine. You can only imagine the various injuries Neanderthals would have, hunting down a mammoth or, a bison 3 times the size of you. Odds are you're gonna get a bruise or two. So what did Neanderthals do at this point? Well, that's what this pile of bones is for. Yeah, it's so dark, right? How did Neanderthals live so long without a pharmacy? All that yelling, no halls, that's gonna hurt. Neanderthals' medical skills are pretty similar to what our ancestors did. Herbal remedies, baby, that's it, herbal remedies. They managed fevers, but when the pain got too bad, chewing on a specific tree may have helped tolerate the pain. So now when looking back to these piles of bones, we find fragments of these leaves in their, dental cavities. We could study their teeth and be like, yes, I can see what you had for lunch. This makes sense. 40,000 years before penicillin, Neanderthals were chewing on aspirin. They were brilliant. Little dirty secret there. Number 8. Ancient art. Okay, here's where we're at with Neanderthals and art. First of all, we don't have actual representational art, but we do have symbolism. That's pretty close, and also just as fascinating in my opinion, especially when they look like this. These are eagle talons, right? They're about 130,000 years old. They were found recently in the Krapina Neanderthal site in Croatia. Now researchers believe that they were part of a jewelry set, like earrings, or part of a necklace. I couldn't even make this now with the YouTube tutorial. You know what I mean? Yet somehow civilizations were crafting this thousands of years ago. 130,000 years ago. That's crazy.
And speaking of stones, still, number 7 is how the Maya were rocking them tooth rocks. In the unique traditions, architecture, and aesthetic choices of the Maya amalgamated beautifully into an elaborate and architectural and artistic world. But it also played a huge role in how the Maya decorated themselves, right down to every tooth and nail. It has been long assumed that the Maya tooth modification was only carried out for ritual purposes. However, a new study published in the Journal of Archaeological Sciences challenges that. See, this culture believed that their breath was a link to the divine, and so ritualistic purification of the mouth, or in modern terms, brushing your damn teeth, was incredibly common. In some cases, people also had teeth encrusted with gemstones, such as jade, iron pyrite, hematite, turquoise, cinnabar, etc. Turns out the sealants used for that were incredibly medicinal. In modern times, we know pine resin attacks bacteria that causes plaque and eventual decay on teeth. Guess the Mayans did too. In the same way, they seem to know about the salvia plant as a binding agent with antibacterial, antifungal properties. I personally don't think I can stomach describing the process of tooth gem insertion in this video, but maybe sometime soon. However, Cristina Verdugo, an anthropologist, says this new study finally addresses the long-standing question of how these stones were affixed. Furthermore, besides knowing the secrets of shaping and boring teeth, the study suggests Maya dentists also knew the secrets of avoiding post-operative infections. On to, you guessed it, more rocks. My favorite in the countdown by a landslide of precious stones, number 6, blood jade and dance. Dance is more than an action, motion, and a means by which to pass the time. It is connection with our ancestors, with the light and the dark and the being around us. The Maya, like indigenous colonies spread around the world, felt the beat of the earth's heart under their souls and used them to pound into the ground in response. By leaping and moving, they could bring themselves into a trance-like state that they would ascend into Wayabis, aka spirit companions. The Maya would often cut themselves with sharp spines, bones, and blades to release their blood before dancing, helping bring on those transcendental experiences through sheer exhaustion. And when making a divine connection, would you not be dressed to the nines? I'm talking masks, paint, feathers, wheat, all entangled and weaved into elaborate colors and patterns. And stone. Heavy, heavy, heavy stone. Such as a 5-pound jade head pendant that had been found at Unikal, which would have once hung off the belt of a Mayan elite as he danced. And this Maya elite, like many others, would dance with an average of 25 pounds hanging off their body. The jade head pendant is more than just a belt piece as a result. The Maya had a concept they called kuk. Originally translated, it means burden. A kuk could be guilt, a physical weight, or in the case of these elites, responsibility, like the responsibility of public office. It was a way to remind him that he was not in his position as a freedom or as a luxury. Instead, he was there to serve his fellow Maya and carry the weight to their community. With every movement he made, he would have had a hard reminder that this was not just fun and games, and with every step of his foot, he would have felt felt the weight of that duty dragging him back down to the earth. Alright, now on to number 5, which will be the new ancient city. We have not had a break from rocks since our first point, but guess what this city's name is? Utukumne. What's that mean in Mayan? Stone column. Don't think you escaped from the rocks. And speaking of escaping, that's exactly what this city did for a very long time. It went completely unnoticed until thanks to the recent approval of airborne laser scanning on the central Mayan lowlands. After receiving LiDAR images showing man-made changes to the landscape, Ivan Sprach and his team thrashed their way through 60 kilometers of vegetation to reach this site. On the elevated terrain, they found several large buildings, including a number of pyramid-shaped ones measuring more than 15 meters. The cylindrical stone columns, which prompted the researchers to name the site Ulukumna, were probably entrances to rooms in the upper parts of the buildings. The team has also found altars, 3 plazas, and a ball court. Pottery unearthed at the site appears to indicate it was inhabited between 600 and 800 AD, a period known as Late Classic. But Sprach said the site probably underwent considerable changes between 800 and 1000 AD before falling victim to the collapse of the lowland Maya civilization in the 10th century. A mystery they're still hoping that the rediscovery of this lost Maya city can help unwind. Was it environmental degradation, political unrest, warfare, or the decline of trade networks? Number 4 is coming, and he's a terror. The plight of gods, the destroyer of man. He is Smoking Frog, the Conqueror. It really is an unenviable job to be the decipherer of Mayan script, which utilized logograms, symbols, and glyphs that were near impossible to comprehend. And hallelujah, someone recently figured out that the little pictures were in fact words. So, the secrets of numerous surviving stelae and inscriptions from the many Maya ruins are finally coming into light, such as the events from the 14th of January 378 AD. That was the day when a foreign warlord, Siya Kaka, conquered Tikal in the most powerful of all Mayan cities. He had been dubbed Smoking Frog because his glyph looked like a smoking frog. Siya's name actually means fire is born, and he was an exceptionally powerful man who hailed from Teotihuacana. Oh, you know, just the most advanced Mesoamerican civilization that we know nothing about to this day, like their ethnicity, appearance, economics, or culture. Just poof, nothing in history. We do know it was a super city, however, which of course placed it in direct conflict with the equally powerful Maya civilization. So, from what historians can gather, the king of Teo set Fire is Born, who is either his brother or his right-hand man, off to go F up the Maya Empire. Several recently discovered stelae help scholars piece together the puzzle of Siya and the movements towards Tikal, mapping his path. Word must have traveled to Tikal of the invasion, and the forces met for a battle 16 miles from the city. This meant that an entirely new era was beginning in the metropolis, as all subsequently erected stelae would tell of Siya and his successors. This story truly is insane, but to dive into details would make it run long, so we'll stick a pin in that for now and move on to unraveling the Red Queen, which is number 3. Archaeologists claim that only 10% of the ancient Maya city of Palenque has been explored so far. Among the ruins of Temple X111, where in 1994, Mexican archaeologist Arnaldo Gonzalez Cruz and his team made a legendary discovery, a tomb dating back to 600 or 700 AD. Excavations were being carried out at the temple to discover its construction sequence and the methods used in building it, with no prior knowledge of burials there. Then they stumble upon what's starting to seem like a big old tomb, attention focused to cleaning its area, and they discover a small blocked up door on a second level of the temple plaza. When they remove the block, it reveals a long corridor leading to one of the best preserved galleries discovered in Palenque to date. A few meters later, and there she was. The sarcophagus was a massive square of limestone, and inside was the remains of a noblewoman and other objects painted and powdered with red cinnabar, earning her the name the Red Queen. This is the richest known burial for a female Maya leader. She has a headdress of green stone and shell, a collar of shell and bead, a diadem of apple green jade loops, and then there's the funerary mask, with obsidian eyes conveying a striking sense of the presence of a queen. Inside the sarcophagus, archaeologists also discover a seashell with a small limestone figure in it, which is pretty cute. Oh, and then there's also some guy buried in the chamber too, but it's assumed he's a servant sent to the afterlife to serve her. He's just Ken though, so back to Barbie. Researchers found that she lived between 600 and 700 AD, and while her name is nowhere found in the tomb, Gonzalez Cruz believes that she was Tizaki Awa, the wife of Pakal and the grandmother of the last Mayan king. The remains of the Red Queen were returned to Palenque in June of 2012. She couldn't be reburied in her original tomb due to the high humidity, so she's reburied in a different one close to the location of her ancient home. In July of 2018, her funerary finery, including the burial jewelry and the death mask, were restored by archaeologists and historians and put on display in Mexico City. Speaking of the the dead, number 2, the entrance to hell. When the meteor that destroyed the dinosaurs landed, it landed and hit the water near Huacanta. Sands there became porous, turning most of it into thick rock, but also giving it the ability to waste away with time and form sinkholes, aka cenoids, which people like to swim in on vacation, and Mayas believed were literal access to hell. So, Guillermo de Anda's team spent 5 years looking at 450-year-old historical records from the Spanish Inquisition to locate a series of sacred caves believed to be the hell passageway. The Spanish had been outraged that the Mayas continued practicing their old religion even after the persecution, so they used court trials to make them reveal the locations of the places where they performed ceremonies. That testimony leads de Anda to X on the map. Among de Anda's discoveries are broad, perfectly paved underground roads stretching 100 meters, a submerged temple, walled off stone rooms, and the confusing crossroads of legends. In one chamber it's impossible to move without slashing your skin, which is a representation of the Room of Knives. While de Anda has not yet encountered a specific jaguar chamber, jaguar bones have been found in at least one cave. Subterranean roads interrupted by deep pools of water may signify the rivers of blood and pus. Why go into the trouble of reproducing a hell? Perhaps it was a way to demonstrate power, de Anda said, or to give an idea of the terrors that they would meet en route to paradise. For now, de Anda's team is connecting tunnels and caves looking to uncover more. The most emotional for last, number 1, will be They Burned Books, aka the July 12, 1562 tragedy at Mani. What can only be called a literal villain to history is a monstrous man named Friar Diego de Landa, whose act of faith at the city of Mani, Yucatan is the most significant example of historic destruction or burning of the Maya books. Something he documented with excitement and pride in 1566 as he had removed the demons from indigenous hearts. Diego de Landa was among the first Franciscans to arrive in Yucatan. He took the time to learn the language and mirrored cultural behaviors to start earning the trust of the 19 independent chiefdoms. This is the first time he sees Maya texts, which he interprets as idolatry and messages from the devil. In fact, there are written records of the indigenous communities, histories, crops, laws, land, and legends. It was around this time he decided to use physicality to force conversion. He persisted in eradicating traditional indigenous beliefs through extreme violence and torment, and encouraged the other friars and lay people to do so as well. Indigenous Mayans began to take their own lives in response. Then comes the day. It's July 1562, and 2 boys exploring find a hidden cave in Mani where a shrine and altar had been set up. They snitch to the friar, who assembles a mob. People were burned in their thatched house, some flogged, many ran to take their own lives, and others were just killed. Then came the burning. The friars, under Diego's demands, raid the homes that still stand. Their written records are stolen, as are their clay idols that hold the ashes of their ancestors, and in a bonfire facing the monastery, all were burned. Everything. These wooden clay representations of their ancestors filled with ash, their family documents and history, all integral to the descendants' inheritance. The foreign priests understood the significance of what they called superstition and idolatry when they burned these idols. By destroying these articles, they literally ripped people's identities away from them, their standing in the community, and their title to their land and property. The ancestral traditions lost lie at the roots of this tragedy, as does the history we will never regain. Despite an estimated 90% of Mayas dying from disease, war, and forced labor during the 16th century Spanish conquest, I want to make it clear, Maya people and culture has never disappeared. An estimated 6 million Maya people still live in Guatemala, Belize, the West Honduras, Salvador, and southern Mexico alone.
Number 2, Ramses II with a vengeance. As some of you may know, Ramses II was the greatest of the rulers of the 19th dynasty and second longest reigning pharaoh ever. He lived to the age of 90, was an amazing warrior, leading the armies of Egypt by the age of 22, and has literal tons of statues of himself all over Egypt. He is also probably a lot of people's ancestor, since he had 96 sons and 60 daughters, approximately. So yeah, it was kind of a big deal in 1881 when archaeologists discovered his mummy with a whole bunch of other ones in a secret chamber at Deir el-Bahri. Originally, Ramses was buried in the Valley of the Kings, as he should have been. But because of the risk of grave robbings, he was moved to a secret chamber. And then, after his discovery and stay at the museum in Cairo, he was moved again in the 70s, when he got a passport to travel to Paris. This guy gets around.
Number 9, Rosetta Stone. You are too fine to be laying down in bed alone. I can teach you my language, Rosetta Stone. Man, we all miss the old Drake. Girl, don't tempt me. Anyway, speaking of diamonds in the rough, the Rosetta Stone. Pretty shocking and important find. What is it? Well, basically it's a large stone tablet that has the same paragraph written on it in 3 separate languages. Why is this so important, you may ask? Well, it's basically helped us learn everything we know about ancient Egypt. More specifically, translating Egyptian to Greek and then to English. Or, since it was discovered by some of Napoleon's people and forces, it would have been in French. To put it in modern terms, it's as if you were back in grade 11 reading Shakespeare and not understanding a single word, but then the bully in school finds the cliff notes for Romeo and Juliet and decides to do a nice thing and share them with everybody. Yep, that makes sense. Good euphemism. That's a good one.
Number 8. Khufu's ship. When pharaohs passed on into the afterlife, they put a whole whack of stuff inside their tombs that were meant to come with them into the next plane of existence. It's why we see the mummified versions of their favorite cats and dogs, favorite foods, and tons of treasure. Unfortunately, after you're gone and buried, some opportunistic people are gonna bust down your tomb doors and steal all your stuff. I'd like to see those grave robbers steal what Khufu brought with him. In 1954, archaeologists found out that, among other things, Khufu had a 140-foot boat with his name on it, buried in pieces at the base of the Great Pyramid where he was entombed. It was almost perfectly intact, and after digging it out of the ground, they put it on display at the Solar Boat Museum, right next to where it was buried. Hopefully, that's close enough for Khufu to still use it in the afterlife.
Number 7. Time warp again. Okay, here's one that's just kind of a head scratcher, but very true. And it has to do with the age of the Great Pyramids. The truth is, those bad boys are old. Really old. Older than your grandpa. And for a lot of ancient Egypt's history, they were there, regardless if the citizens actually knew anything about them. Constructed around 2560 BC. A long time ago. Cleopatra, the most famous of all pharaohs, and the chicest of all celebrities in the 60s. I mean, come on, Elizabeth Taylor, I mean, she's good looking gal. Despite what modern depictions of ancient Egypt will have you believe, Cleopatra actually lived closer to the moon landing than she did the construction of the pyramids. Which is really hard to think about. She was closer to JFK, the pyramids, Vietnam, and not the pyramid. Wow, it's kind of hard for my brain to wrap my head around that. Number 6, bowling. The next time you find yourself in a bowling alley and find yourself a little queasy and you're not sure if it's the smell coming from your bowling shoes or the radioactive microwave nacho cheese you just ate at the snack counter, you can thank the Egyptians. No, not because they made sure to play weird animations on the outdated TVs hanging from the ceiling that were outdated the second you walked in there as a kid. They're old then. Or the carpet that screams 1980s and please wash me. But because they invented the game itself, usually done with stone pins and a stone ball. It was quite popular amongst the crowns back then. Very cool. Obviously they didn't have the animations, but I think that makes it. You know, remember those weird like bowling animations, you know what I'm talking about? Number 5, bug repellent. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when I smell certain things, it reminds me of stuff. I'm like that rat in Ratatouille. It just, oh, I love France. It smells like France in here. I don't know. Don't smell your own farts, Chief. I don't know. As summer is just about to begin for me, it's sunscreen, beer, and of course bug repellent. I don't know exactly what's in the bug repellent, but I know it doesn't work very well, and I know it smells like it's shaving minutes off my life. Ooh, not good. Well, ancient Egyptians had their own version of bug repellent. When the pharaohs and royals wished to enjoy a picnic outside in the beautiful sun, oftentimes there would be bugs. So to prevent this, they found the next closest servant and slathered them in honey. Lots of honey. Ooh, too much. And then placed them a safe distance away from said picnic. Do this a few times and you got yourself a bona fide fly trap. Now you can enjoy your picnic in peace. You know, just ignore the servants screaming because they're being eaten alive by flies and all kinds of bugs. Ooh, kind of gross. Number 4, mouse toothpaste. A lot of things I can understand. There's a point to it all. It adds up. Checks out. The mouse toothpaste does not check out or add up. I talked to the chief and he said that's not it. Yes, the ancient Egyptians knew that dental hygiene was very important, as it is. Go brush your teeth. They knew brushing their teeth was important as, well, yeah, as it is. And should be noted that they may have invented the toothbrush. Pretty cool. However, it is in my humble opinion that they missed the mark on the toothpaste. There's no Colgate around. Basically, you take a cute little mouse and you crush it up until it's just a paste or essence of a mouse, as they call it. Then, to combat what I'm sure was a horrific scent, herbs and spices were added, oftentimes mint, for that minty fresh breath that everyone so needs. Disgusting. No thank you. I'll pass. Number 3. Mummies. Yes, we all know the ancient Egyptians had mummies. Pharaohs and kings wrapped up like a good Christmas gift in preparation for the afterlife. You may have heard some things about it, and I'm here to tell you all the awful stomach-churning things you've heard, they're true. That's right. In particular, the removal of the brain. While the ancient Egyptians were incredibly smart and talented, the process for removing the brain had the same finesse your grandpa had trying to get ketchup out of a glass bottle. I'll get it eventually. Yep, it's coming. I'll get it. A long iron stick was used to be inserted into the nose until it reached your brain, right past the 5th grade memories. The next step was to stir vigorously until you could lay the person on their stomach, and the brain came out in what was probably the most offensive pink slurry I've ever had the displeasure to think of. Disgusting. Disgusting? I can't believe you done that. I'm gonna be sick. Number 2, makeup. Surprise, surprise. The ancient Egyptians came up with another invention, makeup. The billion-dollar industry that isn't going anywhere. You might be surprised to know that both men and women wore makeup back then. Although today that's the case too. And as an actor, I've worn makeup a lot. It's really not that big of a deal, really. What is a big deal, however, is how they made it. If you've ever seen any images of Egyptians, then you know how blue and green eyeliner is a must-have. Well, the main ingredient in that eyeliner isn't paint, folks. It's beetles and bugs. Gross. Colorful bugs were crushed up and added to make compounds in order to achieve the Egyptian look. Number 1, shepherd of the anus. Like I said before, the Egyptians contributed greatly to art, medicine, engineering. They were smart. But for the last point today, we're going to focus on medicine, and more specifically the doctors who were most likely the first proctologists. Way to go, Egypt. The Egyptian for these behind doctors literally traits to shepherd of the anus. They would administer medicine and, of course, the always famous and pleasurable enemas. They loved enemas in ancient Egypt. Who would have thought?
Number 10. Mesa Verde. When I think of places I'd like to pop my city, I can honestly say I don't first think of under a cliff. But think about it, natural protection from the elements, assuming the cliff doesn't erode away over time like everything does, dropping huge chunks of rock on you from above. At Mesa Verde National Park in Colorado, you'll find the remains of cliff dwellings and the cliff palace of the Pueblo people who inhabited the area around 900 years ago. The Pueblo people lived for a long time, on top of the mesas for over 600 years, and then began to move to and build anything from storage rooms to whole villages underneath the cliffs, probably for protection from the climate change and harsh weather, but I'm assuming it was to just get some well-needed shade.
Number 9, Samarkand. All roads lead to Rome. Well, then all Silk Roads lead to Samarkand. Or at least it was a famous pit stop along the way. No one is quite sure when Samarkand was founded. Some evidence suggests that there had been humans living in the area from at least 40,000 years ago. Long time. But one thing is for sure, both its history and finances were quite wealthy. Silk, jade, and all the goods that the Silk Road offered made their way to and through Samarkand. This made the city very wealthy. It exchanged empires the same way I exchange bad gifts from your aunt at Christmas. Persian, Greek, Mongol, and most recently Soviet, in what is now called Uzbekistan. Today you can still find ancient buildings and mosques from a time long past, as that was the main religion. However, the city was also a place of culture and art, which meant for a long time there was some coexistence going on. But it's really nice amongst the different faiths. Very nice, I like.
Number 8. Orkney Islands. You've heard of Stonehenge, but that's been overdone countless times before. You want something new, a different location with the added benefit of having other sites for the kids to go to and check out nearby. Look no further than the stunning Orkney Islands, home to the stones of Stennis, Mayshao, the Ring of Bodgar, and Skara Brae, otherwise known as the heart of Neolithic Orkney. Stennis is our main standing Stonehenge-like attraction. Mayshao is a lovely underground burial mound sporting some striking 12th century Viking graffiti. Skara Brae is an in-ground stone-built Neolithic settlement. And last but not least, the Ring of Brodgar is an even bigger circle of stones. You'll be well removed here at Orkney, situated as an archipelago right at the tippy top of Scotland with stunning views, angry Scottish neighbours, and the Nordic-founded town of Kirkwall. Just bring a jacket maybe.
Number 7. Indus Harappan. The Indus Valley Civilization, aka the Harappan peoples, was the first urban civilization from roughly 3300 BCE to 1300 BCE. Located in South Asia, modern-day Pakistan, and northwest India, the Harappans built dozens of sprawling cities with immense planning and architecture. I'm talking water supply systems with recycled drainage, large skyscraper-sized buildings. They even developed a number of technologies, including one of the world's first systems of weights and measurements. New techniques in metallurgy producing copper, bronze, lead, and tin. These people were smart. In addition to math and engineering, the Indus Valley Civilization enjoyed arts and crafts. Even games and toys have been found. Baked brick houses, clusters of large iron non-residential buildings, and handcrafted metallurgy. We start to see the foundations here, people. There are even 3 cities here that are now all UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The latest, in 2021, the Cilician Desert. Number 6. Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were a Semitic group of speaking people who emerged around 3000 BC. The term Phoenicia is ancient Greek, meaning a colored dye. It's debated whether Phoenicians were distinct from the broader group of speaking peoples known as the Canaanites. The term Canaanites loosely corresponds to the groups referred to as the Phoenicians, so it's a little messy back then on who's exactly who. The Phoenicians rose in the mid-12th century following the decline and collapse of the late Bronze Age. They were renowned as traders and mariners, becoming the dominant commercial power around. They developed an expansive maritime trade network, helping the exchange of cultures and ideas between Greece, Egypt, and Mesopotamia. They established colonies and trading posts across the Mediterranean as Phoenician society and culture centered around mostly commerce and seafaring. As a kicker, of course, historians and archaeologists revealed this civilization most likely has the world's oldest verified alphabets. I can't even build a boat now, let alone back then, with barely an alphabet? Like how? Number 5. Egypt. An ancient civilization in northeast Africa, situated on the Nile Valley, somewhere around 3100 BCE, splitting Upper and Lower Egypt. First occurring as a series of stable kingdoms, separated by intermediate periods such as the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms, Egypt was invaded by a number of foreign powers, including the Libyans, the Nubians, Assyrians, Persians, Macedonians, and of course, the Greeks. Predictable flooding meant a timed surplus of crops, which supported larger populations year after year. The many achievements of these people include immense quarrying, surveying, and construction, using a system of mathematics and science to build and organize what we still visit today. Medicine, irrigation, boat making, the Egyptians did it all. They pushed the boundaries with glass technology, and even invented new forms of literature, and even coined the earliest known drummed up peace treaty. Yeah, don't even get me started on the Sphinx. Have you seen this thing? It's practically being held together with glue and tape at this point. Number 4. Mesopotamia, the land of 2 rivers. Around 10,000 BCE in what is now modern-day Iraq, some of the first fully developed Neolithic cultures began to settle in this fertile crescent known biblically and famously as Mesopotamia. Around 8000 BCE, people in northern Mesopotamia began to cultivate barley and wheat, in which made beer, gruel, soup, and eventually even bread. This is where the earliest signs of civilization began. They were the first to develop trades such as weaving, leatherwork, metalwork, masonry. One of the greatest achievements of ancient Mesopotamia was the invention of the wheel, sometime around 3500 BCE. Mathematics and science was based on a numerical system of 60. This is the source of the 60-minute hour, the 24-hour day, and the 360-degree circle. The Sumerian calendar was 3 7-day weeks of a lunar month. They were so smart, the astronomers could predict eclipses and solstices. Beer, a calendar, and some wheels? Life was simple back then, huh? Like just not a care in the world. Number 3. The Maya. The Mesoamerican civilization of the Maya was roughly between 1800 BC and 900 AD, located within the archaeological site and the city of San Juan Teotihuacan municipality in the state of Mexico. This site has been classified a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1987. Teotihuacan was the largest city in the Americas with a population between 125,000 and at its peak, millions, making it at least the 6th largest city in the world during its reign. The Maya script is the most sophisticated, highly developed writing systems in the pre-Columbian Americas. Hieroglyphic writing was being used by the 3rd century. They are known for their art, math, calendars, and astronomical systems. Architecturally, the city consisted of palaces, ceremonial ball courts for sport and sacrifice, and of course, structures precisely aligned for astronomical observation. Number 2. Rome. In modern history, ancient Rome refers to the Roman civilization from the founding of the city in the 8th century BC to the collapse of the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD. It encompasses the Roman Kingdom, Roman Republic, and Roman Empire. It began as an Italic settlement. The settlement grew into the city of Rome, eventually controlling its neighbors through a combination of treaties and military strength. It eventually dominated and acquired much of Europe, and of that, the surrounding Mediterranean Sea. One of the largest empires in the ancient world. At one point, roughly a quarter of the world's population. Contributed to modern language, religion, society, technology, government, warfare, art. Do as the Romans do, right? Its military created a system of government which was the inspiration for modern republics such as the United States and France. They achieved impressive feats, such as the empire-wide construction of bridges, ports, and roads, as well as the monuments and megalithic buildings splattered all around the world. Every time I flush a toilet, I'm like, man, these guys were good. Number 1. Turkey. Located in the foothills of the Taurus Mountains, we arrive at Gobekli Tepe. This Neolithic site lays in the southeastern Anatolia region of Turkey and is dated around 9500 BCE. The site consists of a number of large circular structures supported by massive stone pillars. Long story short, it's the first construction site of anything. Ever. The pillars are richly decorated with abstract, anthropomorphic carvings of people, clothing, and wild animals, thus providing archaeologists insight into this prehistoric peoples and what they were about. Considered the oldest permanent human settlements anywhere in the world, historians link this revolution to the invention and precursor of agriculture. Gobekli Tepe is a monumental complex built on the top of a rocky mountain far from any known sources of water, and having produced no evidence of agricultural has sparked numerous debates over the years. The site's original excavator, Klaus Schmidt, described it as the Earth's first temple ever, a sanctuary used by groups of nomadic hunter-gatherers from all over the world with no permanent inhabitants. Classified a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2018, radiocarbon dating shows that the earliest exposed structures at Gobekli Tepe were built around 11,500 years ago.
Number 10. Spellcast. I got a bunch of great ones coming for you right out of Babylon, so buckle in folks, you're gonna feel the wrath of King Hammurabi today. This law is to protect against those pesky conjurers, those spellcasters, those pesky wizards. Oh, worst. This law states, if a man has been accused another of laying a spell upon him, but has not proved it, the accused shall go to the sacred river. He shall plunge into the sacred river, and if the sacred river shall conquer him, he that accused him shall take possession of his house. If the sacred river shall show his innocence, and he is saved, the accuser shall be put to his delifing. Ooh. Basically, if you start accusing people who can't swim of spellcraft, which, I mean, everyone can't swim back then, that's just how it goes, there's no yieldy swimming lessons, or at least I don't think there was, you're gonna be the hottest real estate mogul in town. You're gonna be owning a lot of houses. All you're missing is a get out of jail free card and the orange properties, because those are always the best Monopoly. Everyone loves the orange properties. I don't know why, they just do. Number 9. Building code. For our Canadian fans out there, maybe you remember a certain blonde-haired dad who helped rebuild not-up-to-code buildings during the 2000s on a hit reality TV show. No, it wasn't me, silly. Mike Holmes! Yeah, Mike Holmes. We all love him. We remember him. If I've learned anything in my time as a Canadian, it's that certain beams have to be load-bearing, and they have to go in certain places. That's what I learned from the show, at least. Well, another law from ancient Babylon was inspired by Mike Holmes, or at least had him there in spirit. This law states, if a builder builds a house for a man and does not make its construction sound, and the house which he has built collapses and causes the de-life of the owner of the house, the builder shall be put to his own de-lifing. Listen, I would love it if there was never a single building mistake ever again, but man, that's pretty serious. I mean, come on, what would modern landlords be without some 50-year-old shoddy apartment to rent out?
Give me rent. You'll get your rent when you fix this damn door!
Number 8. Operation. Remember the fun family game Operation? That's right! Folks pulling large and obtuse shaped objects out of a man who's not even asleep for his own major surgery. Water on the knee? Pfft, more like easy 1, 2, 3, Dad, I got this. Oh no, the surgery didn't go well? That'll be 30,000 Monopoly dollars. Oh. Continuing with the trend of messed up laws, there's one more from King Hammurabi. If a physician operates on a man for a severed wound with a bronze lancet and causes the man's perishing or destroys the man's eye, which I don't know how that would happen, but okay, they shall cut off his hand. Now, that would really spice up family board game night. Be careful with Charlie Horse, Dad. Wouldn't want to lose that pole polishing hand. I know I wouldn't. Uh-oh.
At number 7, Gospel of Judas. Guys, we might have quite the plot twist on our hands, and it's all thanks to this mysterious ancient text. Researchers found a 3rd century text that they called the Gospel of Judas, and after being translated, might have revealed an alternate version of an event from the Bible. Originally written in Coptic, the Gospel of Judas seems to be a depiction of Judas Iscariot, the man who betrayed Jesus in the New Testament, in a positive light. In the New Testament, Judas was said to have betrayed Jesus by revealing his identity to those who had come to arrest him in exchange for 30 pieces of silver, but in the Gospel of Judas, it describes Jesus as asking Judas to betray him in order for him to be crucified so that he could ascend to heaven. This plot twist is debated among some people though, as other researchers have said that the text actually declares Judas as a demon. Either way, it's a new spin on the story that we didn't have before, and I'd say that's pretty darn mysterious. At number 6, Grolier Codex. Imagine owning something that you believe was just a piece of art turned out to actually be an ancient artifact. This kind of thing is actually a lot more common than you'd think, since over the years, pillaging and looting of ancient sites have led to many artifacts being misplaced and sold around the world. This is the case with the Grolier Codex. The Grolier Codex is an ancient Mayan codex that contains Maya hieroglyphs, illustrations of gods, and a calendar that tracks the movement of Venus. Wanna know where they found it? In a club in New York. The person who acquired the codex, a Mexican collector named Jose Sanez, said that he got it from a group of looters in the 1960s, and after a lot of debate, it was found that the codex that he had was in fact authentic. Researchers found that this ancient text was written on paper that dates back about 800 years and was written using paint known as Maya blue, which actually wasn't synthesized in a lab until pretty recently. I think it's pretty crazy that this ancient text from the Mayan civilization somehow ended up in New York and no one really noticed. At number 5, Popol Vuh. Just about every civilization has their interpretation of Earth's origins. Some cultures believe that cosmic beings made the Earth, others believed in various gods and various motivations for creating life. One ancient text that was discovered by researchers tells the story of the Maya and their belief of how the world was created. This ancient text, known as Popol Vuh, which ultimately is translated to Book of Council, is a mythical origin story. According to the tales written in this ancient text, the forefather gods, quote, brought forth the earth from a watery void and endowed it with animals and plants, end quote. The text also describes how the gods had difficulties making humans and tells the story of how they created 2 hero twins who went on a series of adventures and even defeated the Lord of the Underworld. The earliest surviving copy of Popol Vuh dates back to 1701, but it is believed that there were earlier copies of the text that might not have been found or have been lost. At number 4, Copper Scroll. Next up, let's talk about another ancient text that discusses the existence of a large treasure. An ancient Hebrew text called the Copper Scroll was found in a cave in the Judean desert. This ancient text is believed to contain recorded details of a vast treasure that may include gold, silver, vessels, and coins. The Copper Scroll dates back to sometime around 70 CE, which coincides with a time when the Roman army laid siege to Jerusalem and the Second Temple, a Jewish holy temple which stood on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, was destroyed. Researchers are still unsure if these treasures described in the Copper Scroll actually exist, as it is still highly debated. Even if these treasures really did exist, it could have already been found back in ancient times, but even still, no treasure as large as the one described in the scroll have been found in Israel or Palestine. At number 3, Dresden Codex. For researchers, being able to find ancient texts is very exciting because it can teach them a lot about a civilization, its people, and their beliefs. However, they're often pretty hard to come by due to a number of reasons like poor preservation, warfare, looting, and more. In the case of the Mayans, many of their artifacts and written documents were believed to have been destroyed by Christian missionaries trying to wipe out any non-Christian beliefs, so when one of their ancient texts is found, it's a pretty big deal. When the Dresden Codex was found, it was a huge accomplishment for researchers. The Dresden Codex is an ancient Mayan document that dates back 800 years and contains 39 sheets of text with beautifully drawn images and text on both sides. Researchers done on this codex indicate that it is a record of the phases of the planet Venus so that the Maya, quote, would be certain that their ceremonial events were being held on the correct day. End quote. The codex first appeared in Germany in 1730, but no one really knows how it got there. At number 2, Voynich manuscript. Now this next ancient text is pretty mysterious simply because no one can read it. Dun dun dun. That's right, the Voynich manuscript, a 250-page book containing illustrations of plants, cosmological symbols, and naked ladies, is carbon dated to have originated sometime in the 15th century. It also contains unreadable text. This book was first discovered in 1912 by an antique book dealer, and since then, the text in the book has yet to have been deciphered. There is speculation amongst researchers that suggests that perhaps the language in this book is a lost language or code, or perhaps just gibberish. However, a recent study of the book's language suggests that it does have the hallmarks of a real language. You know what I think the Voynich manuscript is? An alien document. Think about it. Aliens came to Earth and they documented what they saw, like native plant species and humans, hence the drawings of women, because come on, how can you not be obsessed with women? Right? And these cosmological symbols found in the book would also be tied to the aliens because of course they're from outer space. But what do you guys think? And finally, at number 1, Handbook of Ritual Power. Saving the best and most mysterious ancient text for last, we have the Handbook of Ritual Power. This is a 20-page ancient codex that dates back around 1300 years and is written in Coptic. What's so interesting and mysterious about this little book is its contents. Within the 20 pages of this ancient book are magic spells and formulas, including love spells, spells for curing black jaundice, and even instructions on how to perform an exorcism. It's believed that this ancient text may have been written by a group of Sethians, an ancient Christian sect who praised Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve. What adds to the already mysterious contents of the book is the book's opening, as it references a mysterious unknown figure named Bactiotha. A translation of the opening text of the handbook reads, quote, "I give thanks to you and I call upon you the Bactiotha, the great one who is very trustworthy, the one who is lord over the 40 and the 9 kinds of serpents." End quote. The book is now housed in a museum in Sydney after they purchased it from an antiquities dealer in Vienna. How this dealer acquired the book though remains unknown.
Number 10, punishment first. Innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, right? That's how it goes. How do you know I drank the milk? There's no milk on my face, how do you know? There'd probably be milk on my face. Not so much in ancient Egypt. While there is some evidence of jails existing, it is clear that they much preferred an immediate and swift justice. By that, I mean flogging, mutilation, removing limbs, that sort of thing. A lot of these punishments were overseen by a vizier. In today's terms, it's sort of like a governor or official who had the power to oversee things like punishment through. Or at least held the most power besides the Pharaoh, which, hey, that's a lot of power. While it may be an effective system for keeping prisons empty, no one should lose fingers for sliding a couple double bubbles in their pocket. That's just my opinion. Number 9, prisoners. While the promise of losing a limb, the second you're caught taking a cookie from the cookie jar, boy I've been there, is a great deterrent, prison can also work sometimes. It should be noted that Egypt developed a system of law and order 4,000 years ago, which is, well, a long time ago and very impressive. For anyone taking the bar exam, that should be your answer under why take on law. Because the Egyptians did it first, why not? They do it, it's probably cool. So it makes sense that they did have some prisons. There's depictions of prisoners in drawings and figurines, surprisingly, oftentimes having their arms bound to their back like a good episode of Cops. And a leash around their neck with ropes and, well, it just looks a little strange and weird. Given that most criminals were done on the spot, it's not hard to imagine that the Egyptians were cruel to their prisoners, and they were. It was not good. They should be cancelled. That should be cancelled them. Number 8, court. Believe it or not, they also had some sort of makeshift court as well. Who would have thought? No hammer and gavel, and certainly no Saul Goodman or Judge Judy, but hey, without those, I'd argue what the heck's the point of the American justice system in the first place, right? Ah, boy. But they were simple processes, to say the least. During the Middle Kingdom period, judges were appointed to decide on verdicts before, well, it was usually priests, so I prefer a judge doing that, honestly. Except in this court, no one is legally represented by anyone. Yeah, that's right. There's no lawyers, but there was a jury and there were witnesses. Unfortunately, they were often beaten until, well, they said the truth, or the desired truth.
May recognize this next name, it's Etrurius. So, stats time. Where? Central Italy. When? 800 to 250 BCE. Strengths, construction enterprise, iron and copper trade, urban planning. Weaknesses, poor army. Territory desirable to invaders, and locality to Rome. Fun fact, the Etruscans invented the idea of armed and contact sport, or as we more commonly know them to be, gladiators. The civilization reached the height of its power in the 6th century BCE when 12 city-states were allied to be the Etruscan League. Being the first real major settlement on the Italian peninsula, Etruria became the basis of the civilization in late antiquity to follow. They were one of the first peoples to dispose of kings and be ruled by the intelligentsia of aristocrats and magistrates, and their architecture and construction techniques arguably influenced the Romans as much as the Greeks did, as did the city's overall build and stylization. Even the Latin alphabet and the Roman toga have their origins with the Etruscan people. The growing Roman military juggernaut found Etruria too good to pass up, and their League of City-States was annexed into the new Roman Republic in 250 BCE. Alrighty, we are moving on now to the Phoenicia civilization. Stats are, where? Lebanon and Israel. When? 4000 to 332 BCE. Strengths, peaceful and diplomatic city-states, maritime strength, dye and metal production. Weaknesses, minimal military strength, no real capital city or stronghold. And the fun fact is that the ancient Olympic Games started in Phoenicia. So, Phoenicia is known as Canaan in Hebrew and is named after the Phoenicians, a Greek word for purple, due to their production of the purple dye, which would later become the color of royalty and aristocracy in Greece and Rome, and actually a lot of other places. They were the greatest pioneers of sea travel in the ancient world, arguably, and were a peaceful people, never having had a civil war. Equally unknown to many, they are credited with the founding of Carthage, a city that would actually become a major center in both the Carthaginian and Roman empires. This peaceful and diplomatic reputation helped them stave off invasion for a prolonged period, as did their openness to trading and befriending pretty much any nation they came across, as far as Spain and Portugal. Prior to Alexander the Great's conquest, the Persians invaded Phoenicia lands in 539 BCE, but the Macedonian invasion following that was more devastating. After that decline, the Phoenicians became a Roman state in 64 CE and developed a Hellenistic society. Shuffling our way forward, we're now doing Assyria. Stats, where? So, Iran and Syria. When? 2400 BCE to 1300 CE. Their strengths are technological advances, iron weapons, and emphasis on education. And their weaknesses, proximity to other strong kingdoms, and their administration spread a little too thinly. Fun factoid, Assyria contained several zoos as one of their kings was obsessed with animals. And not only were they the pioneers of animal domestication, but Assyrian unique policy for defeated powers was to not incorporate their people into the nation, but deport them and ensure there's no rebellion under their rule, which is literally the smartest thing I've heard from an ancient civilization. Instead of just taking the whole bunch of people, just leave them there. Exceptions were only made if the individual or group was believed to be of greater use to the Assyrians, such as scholars, because one of the Assyrians' greatest achievements was in education, as the school of Nispus is believed to be the first ever university. The Assyrians were also attributed with building some of the first aqueducts and arches hundreds of years before the Romans and introducing the modern idea of keeping time. The final Assyrian demise is shrouded in mystery, but it's believed they entered a dark age in 1300 after constant wars with the Byzantine Empire. After their empire crumbled, their civilization saw a mass influx of Jewish and Arabian people, and in came high taxes on the Christian Assyrians, who mostly folded under the pressure to convert to Islam. As the Assyrians were ethnically distinct from both Arabs and Jews, this effectively ended the idea of being Assyrian. I mentioned this civilization in a recent video and a little bit before. Let's regroup with the Tiwanaku. This civilization proved you didn't need an army to survive. Stat time, where? Bolivia. When? 500 to 900. Strengths, good agricultural location, construction techniques, expert farmers. Weaknesses, no writing system, overuse of their farming land, no military presence. And fun fact, Tiwanaku cities were so grand that when the Incas discovered them, they believed they were made by the gods. So, Tiwanaku had colonized both Chile and Peru. They were a multi-ethnic society who had settled in the upper reaches of the Andes and now are remembered for their remarkable monuments that still stand today, as well as their underground drainage for fresh and soiled water, paved streets, and cities that were planned in a grid system. Tiwanaku became expert farmers and pioneered a method of farming known as flood-raised field agriculture, which used an effective system of irrigation. This well-fed population population of over 10,000 allowed the Tiwanaku to expand into many other areas of South America. The civilization was at its peak of its powers in the 8th century, but mysteriously ended in the 9th. No one's quite sure why the Tiwanaku disappeared, but it's believed that they, as well as other similar culture known as the Wari, were victims of a dramatic shift in climate which devastated crops and caused a mass starvation. As they had no writing system, the Tiwanaku are truly a forgotten civilization. Always a fun word to say. Minoan life is next. Stats: where, crate, when, 3000 to 1100 BCE. Strengths: bureaucratic hierarchy, shipbuilding, knowledge of metallurgy. Weaknesses: weak military and natural disasters. Your fun Minoan fact is that the Minoans had a sport that involved jumping over bulls' horns. Of all the lost civilizations, the Minoans may be the most mysterious. Arguably the first European civilization, they first settled in Crete in about 3000 BCE and remained isolated there for literal centuries before establishing trades. Minoan culture originally had no centralized government and a flexible ruling system with large grand palaces acting as a key area of administration. Their tombs, known as tholos, were a key architectural feature along with their paved road system, running water, and pottery that were later incorporated by Greek and Roman civilizations. By 2000 BCE, kings had assumed control of the island, signaling the beginning of a bureaucratic system and social hierarchy, and women also played a large role in that society, serving as administrators and priestesses, and they had the same rights as men. It's that kind of unity that made Minoans very remarkable. But womp womp, around 1700 BCE, an earthquake rips Crete a new one and destroys most of the island's settlements. They managed to recover from this natural disaster, but now had the Greeks and the Mycenaeans threatening trade interests. Their luck got even worse when in 1375, the island's largest city, Knossos, was devastated and crippled the Minoan people, who were dispatched by an oncoming invasion in 1100 BCE. Oh yeah, ladies, homies, and gents, it's Indus Valley time. What are their stats? So where? India, Afghanistan, Pakistan. When? 3300 BCE to 1300 BCE, and in its mature forms, 2600 BCE to 1900 BCE. Strengths: extremely advanced, mathematics, and metallurgy. Weaknesses: natural disaster, overpopulation, failed trade. Fun fact: unlike other ancient civilizations, archaeologists have never found any evidence of palaces or temples in the Indus Valley, which suggests that there were no priests or kings. The Indus River Valley civilization of 3300 to 13 BC was also known as the Harappan civilization. They were important innovators, but little is understood about the Indus script, and as a result, little is known about the Indus River Valley civilization's institutions and system of governance. What is 100% known is this was likely the most advanced ancient society there had ever been. So, what could have made it end? Historians believe things start to fall apart in 1900 BC, and by 1700, many of the Indus Valley cities had been abandoned. Trade was very important to their civilization. Their main trade partner was Mesopotamia, and around the time the Indus cities started to fail, Mesopotamia was going through huge political problems and their trade networks collapsed. This would have had a big impact on work, thus money, so some historians think this is what collapsed the Indus cities. Alternatively, Indus civilization collapsed because of changes to the geography and climate of the area. Movements in the Indus River may have changed the direction or caused flood. The main cities were closely linked to the river, so changes would have had a terrible effect and driven everyone out. And last but never the least, we've got Vinca. Last stats round. So our where is Serbia and Kosovo primarily, but also Bosnia, Romania, Bulgaria, Montenegro, Macedonia, and Greece. When? From 5700 to 4500 BC. Strengths: cultural uniformity and metallurgy, and also being insanely advanced. Weaknesses: not trading enough statues. Last fun fact of the video, they were so modern their houses, clothing, and jewelry are all stylistically incredibly similar to ours now. Vinca culture and its people begin in the mid-6th millennia BC, when the second wave of migration came to the Balkans from the shores of Asia Minor to create the largest Neolithic settlement in all of Europe. Research and analysis of artifacts and the settlements revealed that a culture and a community of people that had actually had a very advanced way of life for the time. Until this day, no weapons have ever been found during excavations, and it makes us draw the conclusion that they were not warriors but peaceful and gentle. Remains of houses show traces of insulation against elements, and inside houses were intricate multi-room layouts and water systems. Finding decorative ceramic cups and sophisticated tools all speak to a relatively comfortable lifestyle, as does the mini dresses and the shorts and the fitted pants and skirts and the dainty jewelry. Possibly the most interesting find is the presence of copper objects and metallurgy, which date from well before the Metal Ages began. However, it's the same copper that caused the disappearance of the Vikna culture. While people out here made fortunes on the jewelry and the tools of copper, others used it to make weapons and seize their treasure. As the people of Vikna were painfully peaceful, the downfall then began.
Number 10, bowling. Where would we be as a species if we didn't spend the entirety of the 1990s in bowling alleys and arcades? In later years, they seem to have fallen out of style, and for the life of me, I can't figure out why. Where else for $20 a person can you spend time in a large building with the heat on, and the youngest people besides you and your friends is a league of retiree bowlers saying questionable things in the lane beside you? A blue carpet with planets and rocket ships has the same amount of character as the musky clown shoes you wear as you approach the snack stand. A waft of radioactive nacho cheese assaults your nose as the bubblegum chewing student behind the counter asks if you want another room temperature domestic beer. Nice. The foam and bacteria forming in your stomach is a classic tale of a bowling alley tucked away in a Midwest snow-covered state. Nice. Now, with my colorful depiction aside, let's get to the history. None of that glory would be possible without the Egyptians. Yes, they invented bowling. No nacho cheese and weird animations on the TV, but it was still bowling. The ball was made of rope and leather, or sometimes rock, as were the pins. Throw it at the pins, simple, that's it. That's bowling.
Number 9, math. Oh, math. You remind me of a simpler time. A time when I was bawling my eyes out while my dad asked me over and over again, "What is 9 times 3?" Expecting me to come up with the answer under the enormous weight of patriarchal pressure. 27, Dad! It's 27! While the ancient Greeks usually get credit for coming up with mathematics, they actually took it from the Egyptians across the Mediterranean. And then, yes, they improved upon it. The Egyptians used a numeral system that helped them solve equations involving multiplication and the absolutely disgusting fractions. These guys understood concepts such as geometry and algebra, and they were the first civilization to develop and solve second-degree quadratic equations. I don't even know what that means. I wonder if there was ever a little ancient Egyptian boy who got yelled at the ancient dinner table by his ancient father about finding the circumference of a circle in the middle of the night. Probably.
Number 8, papyrus. I heard Egyptians like paper. Well, you're gonna be doing a lot of paper rolling when you're living in a van down by the river. Huh, strange. I think I've heard that somewhere before. Yes, the Egyptians gave the world papyrus, which eventually would become paper. Writing stuff down before this was very difficult. It was inscribed in clay or stone tablets. That's hard. How is a stenographer supposed to do their job? Or when you get mad at an office printer for not working, you can't just break the tablet. We've all been there before, and if I were to make a list of the most important inventions of all time, paper would be on that list. Number 7, mummy workshop. Here's a recent discovery for you. Archaeologists in 2018 discovered a well-preserved embalming workshop complete with labeled oils. Ooh. What's an embalming workshop, you ask? Well, it's the place where kings go to shed a few pounds. Ooh. By that, I mean have their organs removed to be pickled in jars for the afterlife. My favorite part of this process is removing the brain. Cause, you know, you don't need that. Lots of folks walk around without those all the time. Basically, you get a long hook surgical tool and you find the good pink stuff up here through the nose. After stirring the pharaoh's memories like an Italian baker mixing bread dough, you flip the royal over and just let that all drain out until she's empty. I legitimately get queasy when talking about this stuff. That's not a joke, I seriously do. But you know what? I'm glad we found the place, and smarter people than I understand it. All I know is that if an Egyptian embalmer asks you to lick the spoon, you say no. Don't do it.
Number 6, construction manifest. You know, a lot of people include the Great Pyramids of Giza on their list of Egyptian discoveries. But like, how could you miss them? You know? What stumps people about the pyramids is how they were built. So for our next discovery, how about the discovery of a port in 2013 that had a piece of papyri? Isn't that so much more exciting than a massive 138-meter tall building? The piece of papyri actually was a sort of manifesto for those massive buildings. It basically said the limestone used in the Great Pyramid was shipped from a quarry at Tura to Giza along the Nile River. It also said that it took 4 days, and it talked a little bit about how long Khufu was in charge of Egypt and the guy who was in charge of building the pyramids. See, it's very exciting.
Number 5, can't take it with you. In life, you live and then you pass on. If you believe in the homestead signs your mom hangs up in her kitchen, then there's going to be a lot of living, laughing, and loving with that. Ancient Egyptians believed in taking things with them to the afterlife. Yeah, pretty much everything was coming with them. Gold, treasure, organs, except the brain, and pretty much just anything you would need for that kind of adventure. Well, animals were no different. Oftentimes when discovering tombs of kings in the main chamber, or sometimes in their own, were statues of cats and dogs, and naturally, mummified kitties and doggies. Now, I love my pets just as much as the next guy, but a discovery in 2019 revealed a tomb with statues, mummies, and even some preserved crocodiles. Ooh, weird. That's a weird pet.
Number 4, Tomb KV5. Sometimes you pass things off without giving them the proper time and attention. Like the fact that your middle toe on one of your feet is a little longer than the same one on the other side, and you're like, it's probably fine, but it's actually a mutation that all of your ancestors had, and it's the reason you can walk faster than everyone else. Not that that's happened to me or anything, but the archaeologists of Tomb KV5 know what I'm talking about, sorta. Basically, KV5 was not studied very well, and in 1995 it turns out that it was actually one of the largest tombs ever created in the Valley of the Kings. So far, we have found around 121 chambers and corridors, and we think there will be 150 total. The tomb was used for the sons of Ramses II, who, as we know, had over 100 kids, so the size of the tomb kinda checks out. So far, we've only confirmed 6, but there are likely to be around 20 of his sons down there.
Number 3, the Pyramids of Giza.
A lot of people include the Great Pyramids of Giza on their list of Egyptian discoveries, but like, how could you miss them?
Okay, obviously people can see these bad boys from miles away. It would be kind of hard to lose something like that, as Adam said, but then again, as a man, I take pride in losing my car keys every time I need to use them. But more specifically, it was the discovery of the inner chambers of the pyramids that really kicked off archaeology. The verdict? Well, these pyramids not only hold riches, and riches of historical knowledge, but the engineering involved is out of this world, which, you know, is kind of how some people think they were constructed today. The complexity in craftsmanship still has people scratching their heads. As for me, I believe that with enough careful planning and engineering, mixed in with a whole heap of forced labor, you can just get about anything done. There's still much to be learned about these giants in the desert. Ooh.
Number 2, Aten. Even today, we are still making huge discoveries in Egypt. I mean, maybe not specifically today, April 27th, or whenever you watch this, but in this day and age. In 2020, we discovered a 3,000-year-old city buried in the sand, and it's probably the biggest discovery since our #1 spot. The city named Aten, or the Rise of Aten, is the largest city of its kind that we have found and gives us a really good look at life during Egypt's most profitable era. That would be the rule of Amenhotep III. Amenhotep IV is his son, who would drastically change the country's direction. Following his father's death, the fourth changed his name to Akhenaten, abandoned the old Egyptian gods besides the sun god Aten, and moved the royal seat from Thebes to the new city of Akhetaten, which is known as Amarna. He was a weird one, but this city wasn't weird. It was impressive, with an administration area as well as residential districts, production area where mud bricks, amulets, and other goods for buildings and temples were made, along with a bakery. Yeah, I love my croissants covered in sand too.
Number 1, King Tut, the man, the myth, the legend. Besides the pyramids, the sand, and the hot sun, nothing is more famous out of Egypt than King Tut. Well, why is this? Is he not just another royal bro who's just big chilling in his tomb? Yeah, sort of, but his tomb is very unique actually. Unfortunately for Egyptians and archaeologists alike, a lot of the tombs have been cleaned out by grave robbers and crooks, some of which are just long gone. The stuff could have been heisted at any point really, we're just not sure. King Tut's tomb, however, was pretty well untouched, and because of this, we got the chance to learn about a king who really didn't do too much. I think the sarcophagus stands out the most, the gold and the blue. It's beautiful, I love it, it's good aesthetic.
Number 10. Construction. We can't talk about ancient Egypt and the mysteries still unsolved there if we don't start on how the hell these things were built. And also, it's not just like 3 pyramids. There's 118 of these things. When did they have time to construct all of these? Ropes? Pulley systems? Yeah, I'm not convinced. Ramps? Ramps would have been a mile long against the pyramid's height. That's like hundreds of years right there. You ever dug a hole in your backyard? 2 feet. It's like 6 hours right there. And a sore back. Some have theorized a water hydraulic system was used to transport the carved rocks up slopes and tubes with tidal power. Okay, better. But like, how did they line up the rocks so perfectly and so square at the top? 1 inch off and every carpenter knows that's gonna shift everything. Also, the alignment to true north, the odd coincidences with the dimensions resembling the cosmos, they couldn't have known back then, you know? Buckle up, it's only gonna get weirder. Number 9, Chamber of Secrets. In 2017, scientists were able to peek inside the Great Pyramid finally using modern day physics. Particles, actually. What they found revealed numerous hidden secret chambers and rooms that were thought to never exist. The most bizarre discoveries was a massive unknown void nearly 100 feet long that lays just above the pyramid's grand gallery. Khufu, also known as the Great Pyramid, was received the most attention due to its size and age, but it wasn't the only chamber they found. Now, gold, mummies, manuscripts, ancient technology, what lies inside these voids? Also, how the hell did they floor and roof a room that's inaccessible? How do you build that inside such a small chamber already? Muon tomography uses cosmic rays of muons and generates a 3D image through nearly any material. This technology is groundbreaking, literally. Yep, found it, there it is. Number 8, the Saqqara Temple. The Pyramid of Djoser, also known as the Step Pyramid, is an archaeological site in the Saqqara necropolis. The discovery of a 4,400-year-old tomb, now seen as UNESCO's World Heritage Site, is the 6-tier, 4-sided structure which very well may be the earliest colossal stone structure in Egypt, and possibly the world. Stone mounds were made in Europe for millennia, but it was the pyramid shape that started here. It was built 27th century BC during the 3rd dynasty for the Pharaoh Djoser. The pyramid is the center of a huge complex and an enormous courtyard surrounded by ceremonial structures and decorations. Its architect was created from the Egyptian architect himself, Imhotep, the high priest of the god Ra. This guy was like the building manager, you know? The head architect. In fact, wasn't even found or really even studied till about the 1920s, and was recently excavated in 2018. The pyramid went through several revisions over the years, and in March 2020, the pyramid was officially reopened for visitors after a 14-year fix-up. Check out Netflix, they do a great documentary on this.
Number 7, black ink. So you make papyrus paper, but what the heck are you gonna use to write on it? Ink. You're gonna use ink. Obviously. That's right, the ancient Egyptians actually invented ink. Now, they weren't the only ones, the Chinese also invented ink around the same time as well. But this video ain't about them. The ink used by the Egyptians was made from soot and ash from burning wood or oil mixed with water. Some of their inks even contained lead that would help ancient Egyptians bind the ink to the paper. But they didn't just use black. They had red inks made from iron-based compounds as well as blue, green, white, and yellow. It was a colorful place, and they were likely a colorful people.
Number 6, the haircut. A little off the top, Ramses. Honestly, it's time for me to get a haircut too. Is there any mommy out there willing to cut a blue-eyed boy's hair? I wish. I could go for some home cooking too. Anyway, I digress. Yes, the Egyptians very well may have invented the haircut, or at least regular grooming practices. Having long hair just wasn't in their culture, and honestly, in the hot sun and sands of Egypt, can you blame them? I don't think so. When I was younger, I used to have my head shaved. I thought it looked good. It kinda did, but the main reason I did it was because it kept me cool. It was functional. It may surprise you that yes, we got hot summers in Canada. So I can understand why the Egyptians did that. That being said, they did manage to keep some of their facial hair because beards are like makeup for men. We just look better with them. We look good. It's a good look.
Number 5, the plow. Back in the day when we started to move away from the hunter-gatherer lifestyle to more of a work the land and make a new farm lifestyle, Omari would go out into the field with his hoe and cultivate his land by hand. As you can imagine, this takes a hell of a long time, but we're a problem-solving species. That's why we got to where we are now. Enter the plow and the evolution of agriculture. So basically, you take your 2 favorite oxen and you connect them together, and you connect them to a beam of wood that shoots out behind to the plow handle and to the blade of the plow that would go into the ground and be dragged behind by the ox, breaking up the ground. All the farmer has to do is sow the seed. This simple invention changed everything, and it's still used in places where machinery is just unaffordable.
Number 4, the calendar. No one would blame you if in the last 2 years you forgot what day it was. I know after spending a lot of time inside, I forgot what day it was, but every day is a Saturday when you eat spicy chicken wings in your tidy whities. Well, the Egyptians may have had one of the first calendars, and a gosh darn good one too. Their calendar had 12 months and over 300 days. The trouble is, after a while it kinda got a little inaccurate. They did their best to fix it. I mean, clearly if you look at the calendar, clearly it's the 5th of, well, I think that looks like 3 men walking in sand. And next month we have a special festival happening. It looks like it'll be a sunny day on the 12th of man with ball on his hat. Hieroglyphs are hard, man, I don't know.
Number 3, clocks. Alright, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you the Egyptians invented the modern clock. No. But they did have to tell time, and as any dad or survival guru will tell you, the most reliable way to tell what time of the day it is would be that massive floating ball of plasma in the sky, the sun. Assuming it isn't a super cloudy day or anything. The obelisks we see in Egypt were not just fancy deco pieces. They were actually sun clocks, used to see how the sun would cast shadows throughout different times of the day. They even used it to figure out which days were longer and shorter. There was an even more interesting clock though, a water clock. It was basically a stone vessel with a tiny little hole at the bottom which allowed water to drip at a constant rate. The water marks spaced out at different levels would tell you how many hours had passed. This one's good because it worked at night and on cloudy days as well.
Number 2, mummification.
Welcome back to the land of the living, my friend. You've been gone for quite some time. Oh.
Yes, the process of mummification, probably the #1 thing ancient Egypt is known for, maybe besides the pyramids. While not the only civilization of the past to practice this, they kinda ran the show here. Basically, the pharaoh's corpse has to stay fresh so their soul can make it into the afterlife. The heart stays, but everything else is like a furniture after a bad divorce. It must go. The brain was stirred up like a family reunion square dance and drained like last night's punch bowl. But wait, horror fans, there's more. Lungs, liver, bladder, intestines, stomach, kidney, and basically anything you can scoop out with your favorite ice cream scoop is going. But don't toss them out though. Some of these organs were preserved in jars. Makes nice decorations beside the piles of gold found in the tombs.
Yes, my liver jars. Oh, yes.
Number 1, cosmetic makeup. The ancient Egyptians created makeup as far back as 4000 BC. That's a long time ago. And that's how long we've been obsessed with our looks. Yikes. Their makeup actually served more of a purpose than just looking good though. The eye makeup they used specifically was believed to cure eye diseases, which wasn't true, and would protect them from the evil eye, which, I don't know, could have been true. Kind of like the ink, they would use soot, but they would combine it with a lead mineral called galena to create a black substance they called coal. That's K-H-O-L, not C-O-A-L. They had multiple colors actually. They would make green makeup by combining malachite with galena. Now, if you saw our bizarre beauty products and history video, you probably know that lead, even lead minerals like galena, aren't really great for you. But hey, anything in the name of looking good.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Roanoke Island, North Carolina. Just off the coast of what is now North Carolina, back in August 1587, around 100 English settlers arrived to Roanoke Island. John White, governor of the new colony, had to sail back to England to grab supplies. But while he was away, a naval war broke out between England and Spain, so his commute was delayed just a tad, you know. He got back 3 years later in 1590 with said supplies. He's like, hey, sorry I'm late, we got some naval war traffic, you know how it is. Upon arrival, however, nobody was there anymore, including his wife, daughter, granddaughter, anybody. Among the 100 or so inhabitants, they all vanished. The only hint as to where they went or what even happened was the words Croatoan and Crow carved into a wooden post, and C-R-O on a tree. Now Croatoan or Croatoan was the name of the Native American tribe that lived on the island as well. But after looking for evidence, theories, even archaeological exploration, experts still can't figure this one out. I've actually been to this island back when I was 16, so this one really creeped me out, not gonna lie. That's why I wanted to start with this one. Number 9, the Mississippians. We'll dial back the calendar to 700 CE. Now at this point, before European colonization, the American Southeast was home to the Mississippians. Their main area was the city called Cahokia, which is now modern-day Collinsville, Illinois. It's not large either, it's just 6 square miles. Check out this photo of Monk's Mound, a now historic site. We look at ancient Egyptians and our jaws drop at the sight of those pyramids, plus their alignment with the stars. It's all naturally fascinating. Well, Cahokia was once home to pyramids and large wooden structures as well. We're not exactly sure what happened to this 40,000 person civilization, but experts guess famine and disease. Number 8. Catalhuyuk. Another ancient city, another ancient mystery. This time we're looking at what's currently south-central Turkey. About 9,000 years ago, it looked a lot different. Catalhuyuk was popping off until 7,000 years ago, but again, we have no clue what really happened. The most interesting tidbit of history here is the way that this ancient civilization built their homes. They made houses side by side, really close together, and as fitting as it is for this channel, you would say it was almost like a hive-like system. They didn't have doors, they didn't have mail slots or welcome mats. Instead, they had holes on their roofs. That's how they got in and out every day. So yeah, they would use ladders to get in and out, which I gotta say, sounds pretty exhausting. They're probably all pretty ripped.
Number 7. Queen Nefertiti, the queen of the 18th dynasty of ancient Egypt, the beloved royal wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten. Nefertiti and her husband were known for a religious revolution in which they worshipped solely the sun disk Aten as their one and only god. Oh! Blasphemy! She reigned during what was arguably the wealthiest and most lavish period of ancient Egypt. Here's the weird part. We don't know where she is. Usually kings and queens are buried in very spiritual, very high-ranked places like the royal tomb. Easy to find. But nope, no one can find her, or even know what happened to her. In 2015, archaeologists thought, with high-resolution scans, voids that are behind the walls of Tutankhamun's tomb proposed maybe that she was there. Nope, no Nefertiti. In 2003, archaeologists thought through the hair DNA, Nefertiti's mummy may have been, quote, the younger lady. Nope. Turns out it was just Tutankhamun's mom. So what exactly happened to this famously revered queen? Who knows? Aliens, dude. When in doubt, always aliens. You know what I mean? Number 6. King Tut's death. When archaeologists opened a sarcophagus in Egypt's Valley of the Kings for the first time in 1923, it was the discovery of a lifetime. The ancient Egyptian boy king, King Tutankhamun, the burial chamber of the 19-year-old who ruled 3,300 years ago. But why did he die so young? DNA tests and CT scans show he suffered from malaria, a broken leg, and congenital deformities associated with inbreeding, common amongst royalty. Ouch. Because of his tomb's extremely small size, historians think King Tut's death must have been unexpected, and his burial rushed by A, who succeeded him as a pharaoh. The tomb's chambers were packed to the brim with more than 5,000 artifacts including furniture, chariots, clothes, weapons, and 130 of the king's walking sticks. A 24-pound solid gold mask was placed over him, and he was laid in a series of containers, 3 golden coffins, and a granite sarcophagus. His death still has scientists scratching their heads. Also, look up how many archaeologists died months after the cursed tomb had been raided. Yeah, you don't want to know. Number 5. The Lost Labyrinth. Archaeologists uncovered what's believed to be the remains of a long-lost labyrinth below the sand of the Pyramid of Hawara, known as, quote, the Labyrinth. Built by Amenhotep III, it was the most visited sites of the ancient world. Greek Herodotus claimed to have counted 3,000 rooms in the pyramid's funeral complex during the 5th century BC. According to them, the underground temple consists of over 3,000 rooms filled with remarkable hieroglyphics and paintings. Close, too, located less than 100 kilometers from Cairo. In 2008, with the aid of ground-penetrating technology, a Belgian-Egyptian expedition was able to confirm the presence of an enormous underground temple. With no visible remains, the story was thought to be a legend passed down until Egyptologists uncovered its foundations in the 1800s. The results of this expedition indicate the presence of grid-like structures deep beneath the sand. Please tell me there's no minotaur just running around down there. Okay. Number 4. The Mystery Queen. Archaeologists have unearthed a tomb of a previously unknown queen believed to have been the wife of Pharaoh Neferefra, who ruled 4,500 years ago. The tomb was discovered in Abu Sur, an old kingdom necropolis southwest of Cairo, where there are several pyramids dedicated to the pharaohs of the 5th dynasty. The name of his wife had not been known until recently. She was Khenta Khaz, renowned as the mother of 2 Egyptian pharaohs. Khenta Khaz I is a mysterious woman who ruled in the 4th dynasty and has archaeologists puzzled at her burial complex in Giza. Though rough evidence for ancient Egyptian queens, the remains of this female leader were undisturbed for 2 millennia within the necropolis until its excavation in the late 1930s. Hieroglyphic inscriptions concerning her title had been discovered and subsequently became open for interpretation. Her title was initially regarded to be, quote, king of Upper and Lower Egypt, and quote, mother of king of Upper and Lower Egypt. So who was this mysterious, powerful figure in ancient Egypt? Who was she? Number 3, the Dendrolites. All these tombs and underground chambers, how the hell did they see anything under there? Well, we really don't know, but we have some sort of direction. These ancient battery-looking light bulbish things could have maybe been the power source. Ancient Egypt seems to be full of keyholes, drill holes, and shafts that are literally impossible without high-powered tools. Most people say aliens, me included, but I also say the Dendera light bulbs. They've been theorized as being some sort of battery. The Hathor temple at Dendera contains several relief depictions Harsamtus in the form of a snake emerging from a lotus flower. The Dendera light is a variation of this motive, showing Harsamtus in an oval container, a snake inside taking a number of humans to lift, and it holds apparent meanings of the start of creation. Look, I don't care what you say, this thing is a light bulb. It's got a filament. And coils? Come on, drill holes? They couldn't have just lit fires underground? The smoke? The heat? I don't think so. Now, a couple of DeWalts. Just sanding up the pyramids real nice, you know? Who knows? Who knows? Number 2. The city of Punt. The land of Punt, or the ancient city of Punt, was an ancient kingdom sometime back then. A trading partner of ancient Egypt. It was known for producing and exporting gold, aromatic resins, precious stones, black wood, ivory, you name it. The region is known from ancient Egyptian records of trade expeditions. At time, Punt is referred to as the land of God. No pressure, archaeologists. The exact location of Punt is debated and unknown by historians. Cue Indiana Jones movie. Various locations have been offered: southeast of Egypt, a Red Sea coastal region, Somalia, Ethiopia, Sudan. No one really knows. First deciphered in Egyptian hieroglyphics in 1822, scholars began reading Egyptian texts, and the mystery got mystery-er. That's not a word. More questions arose as to where Punt was located and what happened to it. The land of Punt is written by voyagers as being praised for its lavish riches and goodness of land. Okay, so it exists somewhere. This is awesome, isn't it? Wouldn't it suck if we already found everything? We're going on an expedition, boy. Grab your things, let's go. And coming in at the number 1 spot, the Sphinx. Where do I even start? Known as the oldest carved rock like ever, its age is debated literally every day due to the questions it asks scholars. Was it wind erosion? Water erosion? How many times was this thing broken and rebuilt? The Great Sphinx of Giza, the limestone statue of a reclining sphinx, a mythical creature with a head of a human and the body of a lion. Facing directly west to east, it stands on the Giza Plateau on the west bank of the Nile. The face of the Sphinx appears to represent the pharaoh Khafre, although this is heavily debated as wrong gears and looking nothing like him. It's since been restored with tons of layers of limestone blocks. Although still unfixed, its nose was broken off for unknown reasons between the 3rd and 10th century. Maybe some artillery fire over the years, who knows. The Sphinx is the oldest known sculpture in Egypt, and archaeologists suggest that it was created in the Old Kingdom using unknown construction methods. Yeah, definitely that battery thing. From 1817 to 1930, this thing was buried up to its neck and written and drawn about for centuries. I wonder what other secrets lay under her right now. I guess we'll eventually find out someday.